Am I the asshole for refusing to watch The Sound of Music with my girlfriend and her sister? Asterisk asterisk. I, 22M, am spending Christmas with my girlfriend, 22F, and her family. A few nights ago, she wanted me to watch The Sound of Music with her and her sister, 17F. They're huge fans of the movie and make it a tradition to watch it every Christmas. Here's the thing, I really can't stand musicals. It's nothing against people who love them, but they've just never been my thing. I find the concept of characters randomly breaking into song too silly and unrealistic, and I can't suspend my disbelief enough to enjoy them. When she asked, I politely declined, saying, "No, you can watch it with your sister. I'll watch something else." She tried to persuade me, saying, "Oh, come on, give it a try. I bet you'll love it." But I insisted, explaining that musicals just aren't my thing. Eventually, I left them to watch the movie while I did something else. The next day, I noticed she was upset and distant. When I asked her what was wrong, she said it was rude of me to dismiss asterisk The Sound of Music asterisk without even giving it a chance. She felt that I brushed it off too quickly and refused to share something meaningful with her. I told her that she already knows I don't like musicals, so it shouldn't have come as a surprise that I didn't want to watch it. She countered by saying I should have at least tried to watch it with her, given how important the movie is to her and her sister. Now I'm torn. On the one hand, I feel like I was clear about my boundaries. She knows I don't enjoy musicals, and I don't think I should have to sit through something I dislike just to appease her. On the other hand, I can see why she might feel disappointed that I wasn't willing to try something that's meaningful to her, even if just for one night. Was I wrong for refusing to watch the movie with her? Or was she expecting too much from me? Am I the asshole here? Am I the asshole for leaving my mom's place after seeing how messy it was? Growing up, our house was always messy because my mom has a hoarding problem. There were cardboard boxes cluttering the living room, dishes left in the sink, and junk everywhere. As a kid, I thought it was normal. But after moving out and going to college, I realized just how unhealthy that environment was, especially when I found myself struggling with messy habits that caused conflicts with roommates. I'm actively working to break those patterns. Recently, my mom downsized from a 3-bedroom house to a 1-bedroom apartment since my sister and I have both moved out. I thought this would be a great opportunity for her to start fresh. Initially, I wasn't planning to come home for Thanksgiving, but when she said she needed help moving, I decided to fly home and assist her. That week was a nightmare. My old room had essentially become a storage unit, crammed floor to ceiling with random boxes. The garage was worse, overflowing with 20 years worth of papers, broken furniture, and junk. We rented a U-Haul and made 4 trips to the dumpster just to clear some of it out. It wasn't easy. Every step of the way, I had to convince my mom to part with things she didn't need. It was emotionally exhausting, but we made some progress. By the time I left, we had moved all the furniture and most of her belongings into the new apartment. There were still a few boxes left to unpack, and the garage at the old house wasn't completely cleared, but she promised me she'd finish organizing everything and that the new apartment would look great by Christmas. Fast forward to Christmas. My mom picked me up from the airport, and we went to her apartment. The moment I walked in, I was stunned. It was just like the old house. Piles of junk filled every corner. The kitchen was filthy, and the apartment smelled like dog pee. The clutter was so overwhelming that there were only narrow pathways leading from the door to the rooms. I couldn't handle it. I didn't say anything. I just walked out, went to a bar down the street to gather my thoughts, and called my girlfriend. After my mom fell asleep, I went back, grabbed my bag, and left to stay at my dad's house. I haven't spoken to her since, and I honestly don't know when I'll be ready to. This situation hit me hard. Growing up in that environment had a bigger impact on my mental health than I realized. I rarely invited friends over as a kid, and we hardly hosted family gatherings. It was isolating and embarrassing. It's taken me years to undo the habits I picked up from that experience, and visiting her place brought all those feelings rushing back. I know walking out without saying anything might have been hurtful, but I was overwhelmed. I don't know if I have the emotional energy to confront her right now. So, am I the asshole for leaving without a word? Or is it fair to set this boundary for my own mental health? Am I the asshole for taking my sister's Christmas presents away 1 week before Christmas? I, 23F, and my wife, 24F, are currently living with my mom, who's recovering from cancer. My sisters, 20F and 16F, weren't able to take care of her, so my wife and I moved in to help. We both work long hours, especially during the holidays, but we still took time out of our busy schedules to deep clean the house and decorate for Christmas since my mom isn't physically able to. This was no small task. It took us 2 full days to clean, decorate, and wrap presents for everyone. This year, I plan to give my sisters some really nice gifts because I got a bonus earlier in the year. They specifically requested Apple bottom jeans, UGG boots, Sephora and DoorDash gift cards, and some Bath and Body Works products. I went all out and got everything they wanted. But now, after what happened, I'm seriously rethinking whether they deserve those gifts at all. For context, my sisters are incredibly messy. Their clutter and dirty laundry pile up for months before they bother to clean anything. While cleaning the laundry room, I sorted their dirty clothes, placed them in hampers, and put them back in their rooms so the laundry area would be usable for everyone. Apparently, this set them off. In retaliation, they took my clothes out of the dryer and threw them in the trash. I was stunned. After 2 days of nonstop work to make the house nice for the holidays, and after going out of my way to make sure they got exactly the gifts they wanted, this is how they repay us? I wasn't expecting a round of applause, but this level of disrespect is too much. Now I'm seriously considering taking back their gifts and giving them to people who will actually appreciate them. My sisters are old enough to understand consequences and know the difference between right and wrong. Christmas or not, their behavior was uncalled for. My mom sees both sides of the situation. She's upset with my 16-year-old sister because, apparently, she's been asking her to clean up her mess for ages with no results. My wife is supportive of whatever decision I make, but it's frustrating because my mom has been buying gifts for the 16-year-old all month anyway. So she's already loaded with presents under the tree. I feel like my sisters don't deserve the effort or generosity we've shown them, especially after such petty and disrespectful behavior. But I'm torn. Am I the asshole for wanting to take back their Christmas presents after all of this? Or is it fair to set boundaries and show them that actions have consequences? Am I the asshole for choosing not to attend my sister's birthday brunch? I, 29F, am 6 months pregnant with my first child, and due to a combination of health issues, high blood pressure, 3 falls, and a hernia that had me hospitalized recently, my pregnancy has been classified as high risk. My doctors have emphasized that I need to be especially cautious about avoiding illnesses, as even something as simple as a cold could aggravate my hernia and land me back in the hospital. Here's some backstory. When I first got pregnant, my sister, 32F, excitedly declared that she would plan my baby shower. She wanted it to be Instagram perfect, and even gifted us an expensive baby item early on, which we truly appreciated. Recently, my younger brother, 16M, visited my sister's place from out of town. While discussing plans for the day, someone suggested going to a restaurant. I reminded everyone that I needed to avoid restaurants due to the risk of illness. That's when my brother casually mentioned that he was sick but insisted, "It's no big deal, just a runny nose." I froze. I'd already been at my sister's house for over an hour and had hugged my brother when I arrived. While I understood he meant well, I had to explain that I couldn't take any chances. I apologized to everyone but said I had to leave for my health and the babies. My sister was upset and argued that we could just buy masks and I'd be fine. I couldn't believe I had to explain how germs are spread, especially in a post-COVID world, but even after I did, she insisted I was overreacting. Despite her protests, I left. Fast forward to now. My sister has planned a birthday brunch at a restaurant for this weekend. It's December, peak flu season, and she invited at least 15 people. I was already skeptical about attending because of the potential health risks. Then, we found out yesterday that my sister is now sick with the same cold my brother had. I apologized but told her I couldn't attend under these circumstances. I offered to celebrate with her later, maybe at Christmas, if she was no longer contagious. That's when she blew up. She accused me and my husband, 29M, of living in fear and exaggerating. She suggested we wear masks and sit on the other side of the table. Then, she threw out a low blow. Fine. If you can't risk a brunch for my birthday, I guess there's no baby shower. I was stunned. I asked her if she was serious, and she left me on read. So, am I the asshole for not attending her brunch? And should I even go ahead with a baby shower given my health concerns? Update 1. I want to clarify that, due to my health issues, this will likely be my only child. I really wanted to have a baby shower to celebrate, but I envisioned something in a well-ventilated hall where I could have control over things like mask wearing, hand sanitizing, and distance between guests. A restaurant with a bunch of people during flu season, while my sister is actively sick, feels reckless. Update 2. After discussing it with my husband, we've decided not to have an in-person baby shower. We're exploring virtual options or might host something after our son is born. Thank you all for your insights and support. Am I the asshole for giving a sitter a Christmas cash present? My brother Chris is a single dad with 3 sons, 15, 10, and 7. He's been dealing with serious health issues, and while he does his best, it's been a tough time for him. I'm fortunate enough to make a good living and help them stay afloat, so the boys don't have to feel the full weight of their family's financial struggles. Chris has a neighbor, Teddy, who's in his 20s. Teddy occasionally helps out by watching the 2 younger boys when Chris is working or not feeling well. A few months ago, Chris had to be hospitalized for several days. Teddy cut his vacation short to step in. I was out of town, but I was seriously impressed when I heard what he did. Keeping the boys' routine intact, getting them to their sports practices, cleaning the house, doing laundry, and even ensuring the youngest was bathed every night. I've taken on more responsibility for the boys recently and anticipate they might all move in with me next year if Chris's health deteriorates further, which might also mean Chris transitioning to specialized care. This week I took the boys out Christmas shopping. The 10-year-old asked if we could stop by Teddy's house. When I asked why, he hesitated but eventually explained he wanted to give Teddy a Christmas card. He felt bad because he couldn't afford a proper gift and wanted to apologize for being broke. Hearing that broke my heart. I acted like I didn't know about the card but told the boys that Teddy does a lot for them, so we should all give him a gift. The younger 2 made cards, the oldest bought one, and I slipped cash into each envelope before we put them in Teddy's mailbox. Today, Chris called me upset. He asked if I had given Teddy money. I admitted I did, and he said it wasn't my place. He planned to give Teddy $50 as a token of appreciation and thought the amount I gave was excessive. He said it made him look incompetent as a father and implied that I should have checked with him first. Chris also worried that giving Teddy money might make him feel obligated to keep babysitting the boys, even if he didn't want to. I stood my ground. Teddy has been an incredible help during a challenging time, and the boys clearly love and appreciate him. I didn't think I did anything wrong by giving him cash as a thank you gift. I reminded Chris that Teddy's kindness gave him peace of mind during his hospital stay, and now he essentially has a free sitter who's going above and beyond for his kids. So, am I the asshole for giving Teddy money without consulting my brother first? Or was it fair, given the circumstances, to show appreciation for someone who stepped up in such a meaningful way? Would I be the asshole if I move in with my dad even though I know what he did to my mom? I, 15F, have always had a complicated relationship with my mom. She's loud, opinionated, and incredibly judgmental of anyone who's different from her, even in minor ways. For example, I once had a month-long argument with her because I started eating breakfast right after waking up instead of waiting 2 to 3 hours like she does. Growing up, it was clear she favored my older brothers, 19M, 17M. I didn't know how to get her attention except by doing the opposite of everything she did. It was exhausting and left me feeling like I had no real identity of my own. In the past year, though, I've been figuring out who I am, and part of that process has been spending more time with my dad. My parents divorced when my mom was 6 months pregnant with me. My brothers and I used to visit my dad's house every other weekend, but in the last year, I've been staying with him more frequently because I just can't handle being around my mom. My dad has remarried and he and his wife have 12-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, who I'm much closer to than my own brothers. My dad has always been supportive and understanding, and his home feels like a safe space. Last week, everything came to a head. My mom and I had another fight, this time about my clothing. She thinks I dress too masculine, and it turned into one of our usual screaming matches. I decided to leave and go to my dad's house, even though it wasn't his weekend. That's when my mom blurted out why my parents divorced. She said she never wanted to have me. She was happy with 2 kids, but my dad pressured her to try again because he wanted a daughter. She claims that pressure was the final straw that ended their marriage. I was shocked. I left for my dad's house anyway, but now I'm caught in the middle of a family conflict. My mom, brothers, and the rest of her side of the family are furious with me for continuing to have a relationship with my dad. They say I'm favoring him and ignoring what he did to my mom. Here's the thing, I don't think it's entirely my dad's fault. My mom is incredibly stubborn and doesn't do anything she doesn't want to do. So I find it hard to believe she was pressured into having another child without some part of her agreeing to it. That said, I'm questioning myself. Am I being biased because I have such a strained relationship with my mom and feel closer to my dad? I don't want to cut off my dad. He's the one person who has consistently supported me and allowed me to be myself. But now I'm wondering if staying with him more often and considering moving in full-time makes me an asshole. Am I in the wrong for favoring my dad and not seeing the problem in what happened? What should I do? Asterisk asterisk. Am I the asshole for not growing my hair out for my sister's wedding? I, 17F, have a sister, Ellen, 19F, who's getting married in May. I'm her maid of honor, and while I'm excited for her big day, we've hit a snag over my appearance. Here's the context. I have an extremely short mullet. The sides are shaved, the front and sides are about 2 inches long, and the back goes to my nape. I chose this hairstyle for several reasons. First, I'm a more masculine presenting girl, and I prefer the look of shorter hair. My hair is also fine and a pain to style when it's longer. Second, I'm autistic and very sensitive to the feeling of hair touching my ears or constantly falling into my face. Keeping my hair short is much more comfortable for me and fits my identity. Ellen is the opposite of me. She's always been into makeup, fashion, and all things traditionally feminine. Despite our differences, we've always been supportive of each other, and she's never commented on my hair, until now. Ellen called me recently and asked if I'd grow my hair out to shoulder length for her wedding. I told her, no, it wasn't meant to be a big statement, but the issue isn't just about how I'd look on the day. It's about dealing with long hair in the months leading up to the wedding. It's uncomfortable and doesn't feel like me. I did try to compromise. I said I'd grow it into a pixie cut, which is still short but might fit her vision better. That wasn't enough for her. She got upset, saying I was selfish and would ruin her photos by standing out. She also brought up that I'm wearing a suit to the wedding, which she previously agreed to, and accused me of parading around like a man. When I reminded her that she had approved the suit, she said she only agreed to be nice and didn't think I'd actually go through with it. She claimed she didn't want to embarrass me by bringing it up earlier but clearly wasn't happy about it. The argument escalated, and she hung up. Since then, my family, except for my nana, has been siding with her. They say it's just hair, and that I can cut it short again after the wedding. My nana, however, thinks Ellen is being ridiculous, saying she should be happy I'm even part of her big day. I've considered stepping down as maid of honor to avoid further conflict, but I'm not sure if that's rational or just an emotional response to the argument. So, am I the asshole for refusing to grow out my hair for my sister's wedding? Or is this an unreasonable request on her part? Am I the asshole for giving my stepson an ultimatum when he unexpectedly brought home an 8-week-old puppy? My grown stepson lives with me, my husband, and our 10-year-old senior dog. For some time now, he's been talking about getting a dog of his own. While I don't have an issue with him wanting a pet, I made it clear that I wouldn't be responsible for training another dog, especially since he works all day. I also expressed concern about how our senior dog would react. She's never been aggressive, but she doesn't tolerate dogs that invade her space. Well, the other day he came home with an 8-week-old puppy. Not only was this a complete surprise, but he didn't bring any supplies. No food, crate, bowls, or anything else you'd need for a new puppy. I was visibly upset and reiterated that I would not take on the responsibility of caring for or training this dog when he wasn't home. As I predicted, our senior dog isn't thrilled. She growls when the puppy gets too close, which is concerning for everyone involved. I told my stepson that if our dog and the puppy can't coexist, he'll need to either move out or rehome the puppy. To me, this situation is ridiculous. He didn't consult anyone before making this decision, and now he's expecting us to deal with the fallout. Training a puppy is a huge responsibility, and with both me and my husband already managing a senior dog, it's not fair to assume we'll just pick up the slack. Am I being unreasonable for putting my foot down and giving him this ultimatum? Or should I try to be more accommodating despite the lack of consideration on his part? Am I the asshole for telling my friend she enjoys wallowing in her own sadness? I, 25F, have a friend, 26F, who frequently vents to me about her struggles with depression. When this first started, I tried to be supportive and offer advice because her problems often seem to have straightforward solutions. Fast forward to 2022, my brother passed away, and I began my own battle with grief and mental health challenges. Despite knowing what I was going through, my friend continued to vent to me about her depression. At first, I tried to listen, but it started to feel insensitive on her part. I was already struggling with my own grief, and having to shoulder her emotional weight as well became overwhelming. I decided to set boundaries. I told her that if she wasn't going to take any steps to help herself, I couldn't keep being the person she vented to. I explained that I was grieving and didn't have the emotional capacity to handle both my pain and hers. Her response shocked me. She accused me of being insensitive and reminded me that I'm not the only one dealing with hardships. I tried to explain my perspective, telling her that it felt like she wasn't doing anything to address her problems and seemed to enjoy staying in that negative space. I told her it was too much for me to constantly listen to her complaints while grieving my brother. She then said something that really hurt. She claimed she was also grieving my brother and told me I needed to understand that the world doesn't revolve around me. This left me conflicted. On one hand, I know that depression is complex, and I don't want to invalidate her feelings. But on the other hand, I feel like she's disregarding my boundaries and minimizing my grief. I'm not a therapist, and it's not my responsibility to bear the brunt of her emotional struggles, especially when I'm navigating my own pain. Am I the asshole for telling her she enjoys wallowing in her sadness and setting boundaries around her venting? Am I the asshole for locking out my roommate? I, 21F, am a college student living in a dorm with my 19-year-old roommate. This week is finals week, and my roommate has repeatedly forgotten her key. Every single day this week. She tends to come back late at night, and since I can't sleep with the door unlocked, I've been staying up each time to let her in. This isn't a one-time thing. She's forgotten her key multiple times throughout the semester, but this week has been particularly bad. Yesterday, she came back in the middle of the day, rummaged through her side of the room, and then left again. Around 9 p.m., I decided to go to bed. Before locking the door, I checked outside to see if she was sitting in the hall. She sometimes does this without taking her key. She wasn't there, so I assumed she'd grabbed her key and gone out with friends. I locked the door and went to sleep. This morning, I found out that she hadn't grabbed her key. When she came back in the middle of the night and couldn't get in, she had to call public safety to unlock the door. She has my number and could have called me, but she didn't. Now, I've decided that from now on, I'm going to lock the door even if she doesn't have her key. I need my sleep, especially during finals week, and I don't think it's fair to sacrifice my rest because of her forgetfulness. Am I the asshole for locking her out, knowing she might not have her key? Points to consider: responsibility. She is responsible for keeping track of her key. It's unreasonable to expect me to compromise my sleep repeatedly because she forgets. Alternatives. She has other options, like calling public safety, as she did, or reaching out to me via phone if she forgets her key. Impact. Finals week is stressful for everyone, and my sleep and performance shouldn't be jeopardized because of her lack of preparation. What do you think? Am I being unreasonable, or is she the one being inconsiderate? Am I the asshole for telling my friend I won't invite a mutual to Christmas over my own brother? This involves my brother Carlos, his ex-girlfriend Gia, and a mutual friend, Alex. To give some context, Alex and Gia have been lifelong friends. We all ran in the same social circles during high school, which is how I became close with Alex and how Carlos and Gia started dating. Now, we're all in our mid to late 20s. Carlos and Gia broke up some time ago because their life plans just didn't align, disagreements over marriage, work, etc. There was no drama or bad blood. It was just a relationship that ran its course. This year, my parents are hosting Christmas, and Carlos asked them not to invite Gia because he's dating someone new and doesn't think it's appropriate for his ex to be at family events anymore. My parents were fine with his request, and honestly, I didn't think much about it after that. But then Alex got involved. Alex told me I needed to either convince Carlos to reinvite Gia or get my parents to override his request. She argued that Gia's family situation isn't great and that my family has always been the closest thing Gia has had to a supportive, loving environment. Alex even went as far as to say I was choosing my brother over Gia and that family is more than DNA. I told Alex I wasn't going to do that. Gia is a nice person, but she's not my family. The main reason we even interacted as much as we did was because of her relationship with Carlos and her friendship with Alex. While I empathize with Gia's situation, she still has her own family to spend Christmas with. Plus, I'm not the one hosting this year, so it's not my place to dictate who should or shouldn't be invited. That conversation was earlier this week, but Alex is still upset. She's been giving me one-word responses and acting cold toward me since. I understand she's trying to stand up for her friend, but I feel like it's unreasonable for her to expect me to advocate for Gia over my own brother at a family Christmas. So, am I the asshole for refusing to push my parents or brother to invite Gia? Or is Alex overstepping by expecting me to prioritize her friend over my family? Am I the asshole for being anxious that my girlfriend borrows money and never pays it back? My girlfriend and I have been dating for 5 years, and during that time, we've kept separate residences and finances. For the first 4 years, we made about the same amount working office jobs. However, I noticed that she was always stressed about money and seemed to run out of it frequently, even though I was saving each month. She spends more than me on things like eating out, spray tans, and makeup, but we've always split activities we do together 50-50. This summer, she lost her job and has been on unemployment since then. She's scraping by, but she hasn't gotten a new job and doesn't seem to be actively looking. I offered to let her move in with me rent-free to ease her financial burden, but she refused. In the fall, she asked me to lend her $1,000 for necessary expenses, which I did. She hasn't paid me back a single cent. Now, she's asking for another $300 to fix her car. I lent her the money but was visibly anxious about it. I feel like I'll never see that money again, and I'm worried about building a future with someone who seems bad with finances and might drain my modest savings. She noticed my hesitation, and we ended up in a big argument. She accused me of not trusting her and said she doesn't know how to be in a relationship with someone who can't talk about money without getting anxious. The truth is, I am anxious about money, and it's probably because I don't have a financial safety net. My parents can't help me. I paid for college with student loans I'm still repaying, and I've worked hard to build some savings so I can survive. I feel torn. On one hand, I understand her frustration and don't want to make her feel unsupported. On the other hand, I feel like I have valid reasons for my anxiety and concerns about her financial habits. Am I the asshole for being anxious about lending her money, or is my concern about her financial behavior justified? Am I the asshole for calling myself a slow eater? I, 19M, was eating mac and cheese late at night with 2 friends, 19M and 20F. They finished their bowls before I did and started complaining about how slow I was eating. To that, I responded, "Sorry, I'm such a slow eater." Apparently, this really offended them. One of them asked, "Are you being serious?" I was confused and said, "What do you mean? I've always been a slow eater. I don't understand the issue." They then claimed that by calling myself a slow eater, I was implying they eat fast and, by extension, calling them fat. This wasn't at all what I meant. I tried to explain that I was simply commenting on my own eating habits and wasn't making any assumptions about theirs. However, They said they couldn't believe I would say that. We never really resolved the issue, and they still bring it up sarcastically whenever we eat together. For example, one of them will say something like, "Let him take his time. He's such a slow eater." I find it incredibly annoying that they're still hung up on this. Feels like they're projecting some insecurities onto an innocent comment I made about myself. I don't think I did anything wrong, but now I'm second-guessing myself. Am I the asshole for saying I'm a slow eater, or are they overreacting to a harmless comment? Am I the asshole for telling my parents we won't be around for Christmas Eve and Christmas? My wife, 26F, and I, 28M, have been married for 2 years, and navigating the holidays with both our families has been challenging. My wife and my mother don't have the best relationship, so much so that when we first got married, my mother was so rude to my wife that I stopped talking to my family for 6 months. Last Christmas, things escalated into a yelling match between my wife, my parents, and me, making the holiday a disaster. This year, we're trying to avoid a repeat of last year by setting clear boundaries. Our plan is to visit my family from December 20th to 23rd, spend Christmas Eve and Christmas Day at home, just my wife and me, and then visit her family from December 26th to 29th. We thought this was a fair compromise since it doesn't favor one family over the other on the actual holiday. However, my mom is not happy with this arrangement. She feels like she's getting the short end of the deal because we won't be there on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. To complicate matters, she has booked accommodations for us to stay from the 21st to 24th. While we appreciate the gesture, I suspect she's trying to pressure us into staying until late on the 24th, which would disrupt our plan to spend Christmas Eve at home. We've been upfront about leaving on the 23rd, but I know this will likely lead to tension and possibly another argument. I want to stand my ground because I believe our plan is reasonable and balanced, but I also don't want another holiday ruined by family drama. Am I the asshole for sticking to our plan and refusing to stay for Christmas Eve, even though my mom feels hurt? Or should I be more flexible to avoid conflict? Would I be the asshole for taking my boyfriend away from his family on Christmas evening to celebrate my birthday? I have been dating my boyfriend for 3 years, and my birthday falls on December 25th, Christmas Day. Since we started dating, we've developed a tradition where we spend Christmas morning and afternoon with his family, then head to the city to celebrate my birthday in the evening. We usually stay in a hotel and make it a special night, which means a lot to me since I've never had a typical birthday celebration because of its timing. In our first year together, this caused major drama with his family, especially his grandma, who was very upset that he wasn't spending the entire day with them. By the second year, there was still some tension, but it wasn't as intense. This year, his mom made a passive-aggressive comment about how they might as well move Christmas to the 26th because my boyfriend will leave in the evening to celebrate my birthday with me. For context, we do spend the majority of Christmas Day with them, usually until around 7 to 8 p.m., but apparently that isn't enough. I understand their frustration to some extent, as Christmas is a big family holiday, but my birthday has always been overshadowed by the holiday, and celebrating it on the actual day with my boyfriend means a lot to me. My boyfriend stands up for me and doesn't seem bothered by his family's reaction, but I feel guilty for taking him away from them every year. At the same time, I don't want to give up our tradition because it's one of the only times I feel like my birthday is truly special. Would I be the asshole for continuing this tradition, knowing his family is upset about it? Or is it fair to prioritize celebrating my birthday with my boyfriend in the way that makes me happy? Am I the asshole for wanting Christmas morning to ourselves? My partner and I have 2 young children, and for the past few years, we've made a tradition of keeping Christmas morning just for our immediate family. This started after our eldest's second Christmas because we were tired of lugging the kids around to visit everyone and wanted them to have the chance to enjoy their toys and the magic of Christmas at home. However, for the last 5 years, we've hosted Christmas dinner at our house, which has turned into a large gathering with about 12 people. Both our families are complicated. His parents are separated and so are mine, so we have to juggle seeing everyone individually, which makes the holidays chaotic. This year, I made it clear that I didn't want to host again. But despite this, my partner has already invited his mom because his dad will be having dinner with his sister, and the two of them don't get along. On top of that, my dad invited himself and my two brothers over. To make things worse, my partner's dad wants to come over on Christmas morning before he heads out for dinner. I put my foot down and said no because having people coming and going all morning ruins the peace and makes it feel like a constant train of visitors. My partner refuses to tell his dad no because he thinks it's rude. But I don't think it's rude to want some uninterrupted time with our kids. For me, Christmas morning is about relaxing with the kids, opening presents, and enjoying some quiet time before the chaos of cooking and hosting the rest of the day begins. My partner doesn't cook. He spends most of the day lounging with a beer, so the hosting stress falls entirely on me. I've already decided that next year I'm putting my foot down and saying no to hosting dinner altogether. Instead, we can visit people in the evening after spending the day as a family. Am I the asshole for wanting Christmas morning to ourselves and refusing to have visitors during that time? Or is it unfair to push back on family expectations during the holidays? Am I the asshole for asking my husband to wake up an hour earlier before work to watch the baby? I, 32F, am 8 months postpartum and the primary caregiver for our baby, as I'm currently on maternity leave. My husband, 38M, works full-time. Since I'm at home, I handle the night feeds and the majority of the baby's care. Today, I made plans to visit my sister, who lives an hour away, for a massage and some time together. My plan was to pump before the baby woke up, but this morning, the baby slept through the night and woke up at 6:30 a.m. instead. I started feeding the baby, but the bottle was leaking and soaked him. I asked my husband to help by changing the baby's clothes while I fixed the bottle. Afterward, my husband went to the bathroom, and I assumed he was up for the day since he starts work at 9 a.m. At 7:30 a.m., I realized he was still in the bathroom. His usual routine involves taking his phone in with him. I asked if he was almost done, and when he came out, I asked him to watch the baby for an hour so I could pump before leaving. He didn't mention wanting to go back to sleep, but agreed to watch the baby. Fast forward to the evening. When he came home, he was still angry about the situation. He claimed that I had asked him, a sick person recovering from a cold, who also works overtime, to watch the baby so I could go have fun. He seemed to feel that my request was unfair, even though it was only for an hour, and I was taking the baby with me for the rest of the day. I understand he works hard and isn't feeling his best, but I only asked him to step in briefly so I could pump before leaving. It's not like I ask him to help frequently during his mornings, and I felt my request was reasonable. Am I the asshole for asking him to wake up an hour earlier to help with the baby? Or is he overreacting? Am I the asshole for dragging a fight with my dad? I'm a 19-year-old woman who's usually pretty laid back about family stuff, but a recent interaction with my dad left me feeling conflicted. Here's what happened. I had an amazing day at work, one of those rare days where everything just goes right. I came home feeling great, glowing even. Earlier in the day, I'd shared in our family group chat that I might have a work-related opportunity on Saturday. Saturdays are usually when my mom and I spend time together, while Sundays are for her and my dad. For the first time, I asked if we could swap days so I could attend the event. I made it clear that it wasn't a big deal if it didn't work out, but it would mean a lot to me if we could make it happen. When I brought it up again during dinner, my mom was totally fine with it. My dad, however, immediately got defensive and said, well, you better fucking remember this, because last time I wanted to swap, you threw a fit. His tone was sharp and aggressive, which caught me off guard. Couldn't even remember this supposed last time, and neither could my mom. Honestly, I wouldn't care which day we swapped if he had asked me. It wasn't the accusation that upset me. It was how unnecessarily harsh his reaction was to such a simple request. A few minutes later, I told him calmly that his reaction felt rude and unnecessary. At first, he flat out denied swearing, but my mom corrected him. Then, he doubled down and said it wasn't disrespectful because he's the parent, and I'm the child. He claimed that he had to speak to me like that to make me understand he was serious. I tried to explain why that felt unfair, but he cut me off and left the room. Feeling frustrated, I vented to my mom, but she told me she didn't want to get involved. I decided to go to my room, put on some music, and try to move past it. I didn't want this to ruin my mood. Later that evening, my dad started texting me every few minutes, asking me to come talk. I hesitated because I wasn't ready to revisit the issue, but eventually I agreed. When I walked into the room before I could even sit down, he snapped, "Let's get this over with so I can enjoy my night." That stung. I told him that I was already enjoying my night and he was free to do the same, adding that I'd rather drop the issue entirely. But he wouldn't let it go. He started blaming me for being too sensitive, insisting he did nothing wrong, and then snapped again, "Just fucking sit down." At that point, I refused to sit unless he stopped talking to me like that, especially since his tone was what had started this whole mess in the first place. He kept going in circles, repeating the same points and accusing me of overreacting. Finally, I told him that if he could walk away earlier, I had the right to do the same. I told him I loved him, but he didn't respond. I left the room and went to bed feeling stressed, sad, and drained. The next morning, I woke up to a text from him at 5:30 a.m. For a moment, I thought maybe it was an apology. Instead, it was just a screenshot of his win in a video game we both play. No caption, no acknowledgement of what had happened the night before, just the game. This kind of thing happens a lot between us. It feels like I'm stuck in a cycle where I either stay silent and let my frustrations fester or stand up for myself and get accused of being the one causing the problem. I love my dad and genuinely want to have a good relationship with him, but I can't shake the sadness and rejection I feel when interactions like this happen. Would I be the asshole if I don't go to my friend's Christmas social because it seems like only couples are invited? My friends and I initially planned a small Christmas get-together because one of them would be alone for the holidays. Her family is traveling abroad while she's staying back. I thought it was just going to be the three of us, but during a recent planning call, she mentioned the guest list, which is almost exclusively couples. Her and her man's brother and his baby mama, her brother and his girlfriend, and another friend with her boyfriend. She then suggested that I bring a guy friend. I asked why, as I don't like mixing friend groups, and she said, "Why not?" She even mentioned an old guy friend she used to think I'd end up with. Not the case. I told her he moved out of state, and she suggested I bring someone else instead. Thinking about it now, I don't really want to go anymore. I'd be the only single person at what feels like a party full of couples, and honestly, being the odd one out in that kind of environment makes me uncomfortable, especially since I've been single my whole life. The gathering is next week, and I'm starting to feel guilty for considering not going since this was supposed to be a way to support my friend during the holidays. But at the same time, I feel like I'd spend the night feeling awkward and out of place. Am I wrong for thinking this way? Or is it fair to prioritize my own comfort in this situation? Would I be the asshole for posting a video exposing someone at work? I work as a kennel technician at a humane society and currently serve as a lead in the small dogs department. The incident in question happened when I was temporarily working in the cat department, which was under quarantine due to a ringworm outbreak. A board member and another individual associated with the board entered the restricted area, ignoring the quarantine protocols. I politely informed them they weren't allowed in and confirmed with my boss that this was the case. Despite this, the board member became defensive, rude, and refused to leave. Sensing the situation escalating, I began recording for my safety. That's when she slapped the phone out of my hand. At that point, I called the medical lead to join me as a witness in case things got worse. Things did escalate. After leaving the cat department, the board member cursed at me, threatened my job, and even pushed the medical lead who had stepped between us. I immediately reported everything to my boss and shared the video of the incident. My boss assured me that the situation would be brought to the board's attention. But here's where it gets frustrating. Nothing meaningful was done. Many coworkers who heard about the incident confirmed that the board member is frequently rude and difficult, but the board itself remained silent. When I asked about consequences for the board member, I was told that they wouldn't share how or if she was disciplined. Worse, I was told I could have been fired for recording the incident, despite doing so for my safety, and for using foul language during the altercation. I had said, "I don't give a f*** out of frustration during the argument." To top it off, the board decided not to offer me an apology, even after reviewing the video. I'm furious. I want to post the video publicly to expose the unprofessionalism and double standards. However, I'm torn because I care deeply about the animals and fear that sharing the video could negatively affect the shelter. I worry it might hurt fundraising, adoptions, or public perception, and that ultimately the animals would suffer because of the fallout. Some additional context. The board members act entitled, regularly flouting rules, and create an unbearable work environment. They use their positions as power plays, making comments like, "Do you know who we are? We're your boss's boss," even though the board as a group, not individuals, has oversight. Their disregard for quarantine protocols directly impacted the animals. One of the board members gave ringworm to their pets after entering a restricted area against rules. Many amazing coworkers have left due to the toxic environment created by board members like her. The turnover rate is incredibly high, not because of the work itself but because of the mistreatment of staff. I'm so tired of the unfairness. I love the animals and my job, but the constant disrespect and lack of accountability are pushing me to my limit. If I post the video, I'd probably quit or get fired, but at least the public would see what's really going on. Am I the asshole for not agreeing to my wife's idea of spending Christmas in Dallas with her sister? My wife is super close with her sister. They were inseparable growing up. Her sister is also married with kids like we are, and they're wonderful people. A couple of years ago, my wife's sister's husband got a great job in Dallas, and they moved away from our hometown about 7 hours from us. A few weeks ago, in late November, my wife said to me, "I was talking to my sister, and they want us to come up and spend Christmas with them. Let's do it. There are lots of Christmas activities to do there. Plenty for the kids. It'll be great." I immediately felt uneasy but tried to be neutral and replied, "Well, I guess so. Baby. Maybe. But I don't know." While shaking my head. Over the next few weeks, I kept thinking about it, and the more I did, the more I realized how much I didn't want to go. First, traveling is expensive and it's not in our budget. Between gas, food, and all the little expenses that come with traveling, like activities for the kids and eating out, it adds up quickly. On top of that, there's the cost of time. This year, I was lucky to get the entire Christmas week off, and I had plans to use that time to relax, catch up on house projects, and even focus on my side hustle. Another reason is that we're close to a lot of friends and family here in our hometown. We've been invited to 7 different Christmas parties this year alone. While we see our loved ones regularly at barbecues, church, and other events, Christmas parties are different. They have a special energy and magic that I look forward to. Beyond that, I love the comfort of celebrating Christmas in our own home. Waking up on Christmas morning in your own bed, opening gifts under your own tree, and drinking coffee from your own coffee maker. It's just so special. For the kids, waking up in their own beds and finding their gifts from Santa in their familiar surroundings adds to the magic. I'd also much rather shower in my own bathroom and avoid living out of a suitcase for several days. When I finally told my wife how I felt, I suggested that we visit her sister another time, like spring break or a long weekend. I made it clear that I'm not against visiting them. I just don't want to do it for Christmas. She countered that we see our local friends and family all the time, but she rarely gets to spend time with her sister. She feels that going to Dallas for Christmas is important because of how close they are. I understand her perspective, but I still don't think traveling for Christmas is the right choice for our family this year. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for stopping my boyfriend from doing the right thing? I, 24F, have been dating my boyfriend, 24M, for 6 months. Early in our relationship, he told me about a short-lived fling he had with a woman named G, 24F, before meeting me. They had gone on a couple of dates, including a 7-day trip to the Caribbean, but eventually agreed they weren't compatible and parted ways. When he told me about this, I was cautious but chose to move past it. A few weeks into our relationship, I asked him about his plans for the weekend. He casually mentioned finding a bracelet that G had left in his suitcase after their trip. He said he was considering driving 2 hours, a 4-hour round trip, to personally return it to her. This immediately made me uncomfortable. While I understand the bracelet has sentimental value to G, as it was a gift from her mother, I didn't see why it had to be returned in person. I suggested mailing it instead, offering to cover the costs for tracked and insured shipping to ensure it arrived safely. To me, this seemed like a reasonable compromise, especially since I had expressed my discomfort about him going out of his way to meet her. I also talked to my friends about it, and they agreed with me. They questioned why he would dedicate 4 hours to personally return a bracelet when mailing it was a simpler and less emotionally complicated option. I understood the bracelet was important, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was unnecessary, especially when there was an easy and logical alternative. My boyfriend didn't see it that way. He explained that G lives in a shared house where packages are often stolen and that she doesn't drive or have access to reliable public transportation to pick it up herself. He insisted that he wanted to return it personally because it was sentimental to her, and he'd feel terrible if it got lost in the mail. He even suggested I join him for the drive, saying we could turn it into a beach trip since she lives near the coast. But I felt the issue wasn't the trip itself, it was the principle. I had been clear about my feelings, and it hurt that he seemed willing to dismiss them for something that, in my eyes, could be resolved differently. Things became even more complicated when we found out that G had moved to our city. My boyfriend thought this made things easier since we could now drop the bracelet off without a long trip. But my discomfort didn't change. The issue wasn't the logistics anymore. It was the fact that he was willing to do something that made me uncomfortable when an alternative was available. I told him how I felt, but he pushed back, saying he felt guilty about holding onto the bracelet for so long and thought I didn't care about his desire to do the right thing. He was hurt that I wasn't willing to support his plan and suggested I was being unfair by not compromising. At this point, I'm torn. I want him to respect my feelings and find another way to return the bracelet, but he insists on handling it in a way that makes me uncomfortable. Am I the asshole for asking him to respect my feelings, or is he the asshole for disregarding them? Am I the asshole for cooking scrambled eggs the way I normally do? This morning, I, 20M, was asked by my dad to make breakfast for the family. We were low on groceries, so I decided to make scrambled eggs. Cooking scrambled eggs is something I do pretty often for myself, so I went on autopilot, seasoning them with salt and pepper the way I usually like them. I didn't think much about adjusting the seasoning for anyone else's preferences. Just cooked the eggs as I normally do. When the eggs were done, I served them to my mom, dad, and brother. Shortly after, my dad came storming back into the kitchen, furious. He started yelling that I had intentionally made the eggs too salty to antagonize him. He accused me of making the food inedible on purpose as part of some sort of plot to kick him out of the house. He even suggested that my mom and I were conspiring to poison or starve him. I was stunned. I tried to explain that I didn't mean to oversalt the eggs. It was just a mistake. I wasn't paying enough attention and seasoned them the way I normally would for myself. But no matter how I tried to explain, he wouldn't listen. He was convinced that I had done it maliciously, and the accusations just kept escalating. Now I'm left wondering if I was in the wrong for not being more thoughtful about the seasoning, even if it wasn't intentional. Should I have been more careful knowing I was cooking for others? Or is my dad overreacting by turning this into such a big issue? So, am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for refusing to get rid of my dog for having accidents in the house? My 30F boyfriend, 34M, wants me to get rid of my dog because she sometimes has accidents in the house. We've had her for 4 months after adopting her from a shelter when she was 4 months old. She's a pit mix and is our newest addition to a house that already includes 2 other dogs and 3 cats, 2 of which we got together, while the other pets were part of our lives before the relationship. My dog is fully potty trained and has access to a doggy door. However, she has a submissive urination problem. It's improving, but she still occasionally has accidents when she gets too excited or thinks she's in trouble. The accidents happen more often with my boyfriend, typically when she's overexcited around him. We've been working on this issue for 2 months together, and I've been addressing it for 3 months overall. I've followed every suggestion for handling submissive urination, and we've made consistent progress. We also have a baby gate set up to keep the dogs on hard flooring, where cleanup is easier. Recently, I took her to the vet to rule out any medical issues. We're waiting for a urine sample to confirm this, but if it turns out to be behavioral, I plan to try anxiety medication to help her. She also had worms, which caused loose stools, but she's now being treated for that. 2 nights ago, I closed off the back door access to the yard because of the cold, leaving only the doggy door to the garage open. She pooped in the garage overnight. While unpleasant, I cleaned it up quickly. Last night, with access to the doggy door restored, she accidentally got stuck in the living room and had an accident on the rug. Again, I cleaned it thoroughly with a shampooer. To me, these accidents are manageable and not her fault. My boyfriend, however, sees them as the last straw. He's given me until New Year's to fix the issue and is insisting I rehome her if the problem persists. He feels this is me choosing the dog over him and we're at an impasse. I genuinely love this man and want our family, his 6-year-old son, our 2-year-old daughter, and all our pets, to stay intact. But I also love my dog and don't believe these occasional accidents justify giving her up. She's improving, and I'm committed to helping her. Am I the asshole for refusing to give up my dog over these issues? Or is my boyfriend being unreasonable in demanding this? Am I the asshole for not taking hints from my roommate? I, 21F, live in a spacious apartment with my husband, 23M, and a roommate. The roommate has his own private room and bathroom. We originally helped him get out of a bad lease, and he helped us with ours. He's also a friend and colleague of my husband, so we had a mostly neutral to positive relationship, hanging out together occasionally and keeping things friendly. Until recently, I didn't think there were any major communication barriers. But things have drastically changed. One day, I overheard him yelling in the living room, a shared space. Startled me, and I asked if something was wrong. To my shock, he began unloading months of pent-up complaints about my husband and me, revealing he had grown to hate us over time. I was completely blindsided. He had a long list of grievances about our behavior as roommates. One example he brought up was finding a single hair in the kitchen, which grossed him out so much that he claimed he almost vomited. He also criticized our general cleanliness, citing incidents like leaving disassembled furniture in the shared space for a couple of weeks. What made this confusing was that he had previously approved us using the space temporarily, but he still felt it was disrespectful. For context, my husband and I both have extremely busy and irregular schedules. My husband owns a 24/7 business, and I help with that while also working a separate contract job. As a result, our focus on housekeeping sometimes slips, though we genuinely try to stay on top of things. For example, I make it a point to avoid making noise past 9 p.m., even though none of us usually go to bed at that time. I don't leave trash in shared spaces, keep track of dishes and fridge organization, and handle my share of chores. I've also always been mindful of offering to share treats or snacks on special occasions. When I tried to explain that we weren't neglectful on purpose and asked him to communicate directly about issues in the future, he flatly refused. He said he'd never explicitly tell us if something bothered him because hints should be enough, and not picking up on those hints makes us dumb, insensitive, and childish. This came as a shock because he's not a particularly tidy person himself. He often leaves messes in his own space. His hostility felt completely disproportionate to the issues he raised. Now, my husband and I feel awkward and stressed at home, constantly worrying we're unknowingly doing something to upset him. We've decided to move out and live on our own to avoid further tension. Still, I feel conflicted, partly guilty for upsetting him but also angry because I genuinely tried to be a considerate roommate. His refusal to communicate directly and preference for passive-aggressive hints has left me feeling like I'm navigating a minefield. Was I wrong for expecting open communication instead of trying to decipher his hints? Or is his approach valid, and I just didn't do enough to be a good roommate? Would I be the asshole for taking my car to visit my family for Christmas, leaving my girlfriend without transport? A year ago, my girlfriend and I lived in the city with a roommate. When she began an apprenticeship outside the city, we moved to a town closer to her workplace to make her commute easier and to have a place to ourselves. Now, her workplace is just 1.5 kilometers from our house, reducing her commute to about 5 minutes. I mostly work from home, so commuting wasn't a big factor for me. After the move, I got a great deal on a car from a family member. The car has been incredibly useful since we live on a steep hill, and public transport here isn't ideal. Buses run only every 30 minutes. This made errands and getting around far more convenient. Currently, my girlfriend uses the car daily to drive to work, even though her job is just 1.5 kilometers away. Her lunch break begins at 12:15, but sometimes emergencies delay her until 12:30. She typically drives home, eats lunch, and leaves by 13:30 to return to work. The bus schedule doesn't make this easy. One bus leaves at 12:33, and the next at 13:03. Without the car, she'd barely have enough time to get home, eat, and head back. Since I don't usually need the car during the day, I let her use it. If I do need it, I simply drop her off after lunch and pick her up later. ####the Christmas dilemma. Christmas is approaching, and we've made plans to visit her family, an 8-hour drive, over New Year's since she has to work on Christmas Eve and the 27th. I, however, want to visit my family, a 3-hour drive, starting on the 21st. Naturally, I'd prefer to take my car. Taking the train is an option, but it would mean carrying presents and luggage through public transport, and the ticket costs more than driving. Plus, I might need a car while visiting my family, though I could use theirs in a pinch. The issue is their car is a brand new Audi RS4, and I'm not comfortable driving it in snowy conditions, or asking to use it at all. My girlfriend feels strongly that I should take the train so she can keep the car. She'll be working during this time, and without the car, her days will be tougher. She'd have to walk to work in cold December weather, and her lunch breaks would be shorter and more stressful without the flexibility of driving. However, it's important to note that this is my car. I pay for everything related to it, insurance, maintenance, gas, and I let her use it daily because it makes her life easier. Additionally, I cover the majority of our shared expenses because her apprentice wage is very low, below the poverty line. She contributes what she can, and we track larger expenses she plans to repay once her income improves. Her debt to me currently exceeds $4,000, interest-free, though I don't include food or small daily costs in that amount, just major shared expenses like utility bills or trips. To be clear, this repayment plan was her idea. While I understand her perspective, I feel that it's reasonable for me to use my own car for a trip to see my family during the holidays. The inconvenience she'd experience without the car for a few days is unfortunate, but I already go out of my way to accommodate her needs year-round. ####. So, would I be the asshole for taking my car to visit my family for Christmas, leaving her without transportation? Am I the asshole for expecting to sleep in when I've had a bad night with the kids? I'm a mom to 3 boys, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and an 18-month-old. Lately, our sleeping arrangements have been far from ideal, and I'm exhausted. My 5-year-old sleeps pretty well in his own room, but the younger 2 currently sleep in my bedroom. My husband has moved to a queen bed in our office/spare room, mostly because his snoring is so loud it keeps me up, and also because the little ones waking through the night means I'd spend half the night going back and forth between rooms if we weren't in the same space. The younger kids' sleep patterns are unpredictable. Sometimes they only wake up once, but on bad nights, if my 18-month-old is teething, sick, or going through a regression, it's rough. My 3-year-old often ends up in my bed, whether because of bad dreams or just wanting to cuddle, and he wakes me up whenever he shifts around. On top of that, both kids wake up early, usually around 5 a.m., and are on and off until about 6 or 6:30. During this time, I try to keep them in the room, hoping they'll fall back asleep for a bit to avoid being cranky during the day or waking the rest of the house. This routine means I rarely get proper sleep. Between waking to settle them at night, handling early mornings, and staying up until 7 or 7:30 p.m. to put them to bed, sometimes with more resettling needed during the evening, I'm utterly drained. My husband, on the other hand, has uninterrupted kid-free time from 7:30 p.m. to about 6 or 6:30 a.m. most days. Here's where the conflict comes in. I've asked that on days my husband is home, whether working from home or on weekends, I get to sleep in from around 6 or 6:30 a.m. to 8 a.m. so I can recover a bit from the sleepless nights. He, however, has started complaining, saying that he never gets to sleep in except for special occasions like his birthday, Father's Day, or the rare time he's been out late for a gig. He feels it's unfair that I'm asking for more mornings to sleep in when he doesn't get the same. But here's the thing. I honestly can't remember the last time I had a full night's sleep, let alone an uninterrupted one. For the past 4 years, I've been the one up at night with the kids, and during the day, I'm also the one taking care of them, especially when our 5-year-old isn't at kindergarten. My husband gets the luxury of sleep most nights, and he's not the one handling early mornings after being up multiple times the night before. I've told him that if I could get a proper night off, a full, uninterrupted night of sleep, I'd be fine with being up at 6 or 6:30 in the morning more often. But until then, I think it's only fair that I get those extra couple of hours on the mornings he's around. So, am I the asshole for not giving him more chances to sleep in, considering I'm running on empty and haven't had a decent rest in years? Or is my request for some recovery time unreasonable? Am I the asshole for snapping at my intrusive mom while hosting her for the holidays? To start, my mother has always been a complicated person. She has struggled with mental health issues for as long as I can remember, and while she can be loving, she's also incredibly needy, intrusive, and often treats me like an extension of herself rather than as my own person. This year, she asked to come visit me for the holidays, and I agreed. I thought it would be a short, manageable visit, but she took my casual sure as permission to book a 2-week stay at my small 1-bedroom apartment without asking me first. My apartment has just one bed, so this arrangement essentially means sharing a bed with her, something I'm absolutely uncomfortable with. When I found out about her plans, I told her firmly not to do that again, but she acted like I was being unreasonable. Now that she's here, it feels like she's completely taken over my space, and I'm struggling to maintain any sense of normalcy. Here are just a few things she's done during her stay. 1. Assign chores to me in my own home. She'll say things like, "Today you need to clean the bathroom, and I'll clean your fridge." I didn't ask for help with my fridge or for her to manage my home. 2. Disgusting behavior in my personal space. She thinks it's funny to fart on my bed and pillows, even after I've asked her to stop. It's a small apartment, so the smell lingers. I've had to yell at her to open a window or use air freshener, but she dismisses me and laughs. 3. No bathroom boundaries. The other day, I was putting on mascara in the bathroom when she announced she needed to use it. I asked for just 1 minute to finish, but instead of waiting, she proceeded to use the toilet for a bowel movement while I was still there, forcing me to leave. 4. Interrupting my sleep. She barges into my room loudly in the middle of the night to ask questions or start conversations, ignoring the fact that I'm trying to rest. 5. Interfering with my dog's routine. I've explained my dog's feeding and walking schedule multiple times, but she constantly nags me about it, saying things like, "When are you feeding her?" Or, "I think she's hungry now," even when it's not time. These behaviors have pushed me to my breaking point. Yesterday, I snapped. I told her I didn't ask her to come for 2 weeks and that she's intruding on my small space. I also said she should have gotten an Airbnb because I can't handle being in such close quarters with someone who has no concept of boundaries or consideration. I'll admit my tone was harsh, but I feel like I've been pushed to the edge. She didn't take this well, of course. She accused me of being ungrateful and nitpicky, dismissing my feelings entirely, as she always does when I try to set boundaries in a calm and respectful way. I understand that my delivery might have been meaner than it needed to be, but I've tried polite approaches before, and she either ignores or mocks them. This situation has left me wondering, am I the asshole for snapping at my intrusive and inconsiderate mom? Or was my reaction justified given the circumstances? Am I the asshole for reporting my ex-boss? I recently started a job that seemed fine at first, but after 2 weeks, everything went downhill quickly due to my employer's behavior. What started as uncomfortable jokes escalated into a toxic, abusive work environment that pushed me to my limit. Here's a breakdown of what happened. 1. Inappropriate requests. My boss began asking for help with his personal life, such as going to his home or working extra hours without breaks or overtime pay. He'd also make homophobic comments, which I told him made me uncomfortable, but he ignored me. 2. Gaslighting. He constantly misrepresented what I said or did. He'd claim I said things I didn't or deny things I know happened. He'd reference supposed surveillance footage but never actually show me the recordings. 3. Erratic behavior. He started behaving unpredictably, crying, screaming, singing, or laughing maniacally in front of customers. It was uncomfortable for everyone and created a hostile work environment. 4. Exploitation asterisk I worked 10-plus-hour shifts without breaks. He'd pressure me to stay late, claiming he needed reliable workers and threatening to fire people or make their lives difficult if they didn't comply. 5. Verbal abuse asterisk he began cursing me out and harassing me verbally, which was the last straw. When I decided to quit, I tried to give a 1-week notice, thinking it was reasonable. Instead, he fired me on the spot and told me never to come near him or the workplace again. The real issue began after I left. He refused to pay me for the work I'd already done, citing some obscure law to delay payment. I refused to meet with him in person or answer his calls, but I kept detailed records of everything, including proof of his lies. Eventually, the time limit for payment ran out, and I reported him to the state. Now there's an open case against him. Additionally, the working conditions in his business were unsanitary and likely illegal. If an investigator were to look into the situation thoroughly, they would probably uncover more violations. I also know I'm not the only employee he's treated this way. Others have experienced similar mistreatment. Since I reported him, he's been bad-mouthing me to a lot of people, trying to tarnish my reputation. Some people seem to think I overreacted, which has left me questioning if I went too far. But from my perspective, I was forced to act because he crossed so many boundaries, exploited me, and then refused to pay me for my work. Reporting him seemed like the only way to protect myself and potentially stop him from doing the same to others. So, am I the asshole for reporting him? Or was I justified in taking action against his abusive and illegal behavior? Am I the asshole for reporting my ex-boss? I recently started a job that seemed fine at first, but after 2 weeks, everything went downhill quickly due to my employer's behavior. What started as uncomfortable jokes escalated into a toxic, abusive work environment that pushed me to my limit. Here's a breakdown of what happened. 1. Inappropriate requests asterisk my boss began asking for help with his personal life, such as going to his home or working extra hours without breaks or overtime pay. He'd also make homophobic comments, which I told him made me uncomfortable, but he ignored me. 2. Gaslighting asterisk he constantly misrepresented what I said or did. He'd claim I said things I didn't or deny things I know happened. He'd reference supposed surveillance footage but never actually show me the recordings. 3. Erratic behavior asterisk he started behaving unpredictably, crying, screaming, singing, or laughing maniacally in front of customers. It was uncomfortable for everyone and created a hostile work environment. 4. Exploitation asterisk I worked 10-plus-hour shifts without breaks. He'd pressure me to stay late, claiming he needed reliable workers and threatening to fire people or make their lives difficult if they didn't comply. 5. Verbal abuse asterisk he began cursing me out and harassing me verbally, which was the last straw. When I decided to quit, I tried to give a 1-week notice, thinking it was reasonable. Instead, he fired me on the spot and told me never to come near him or the workplace again. The real issue began after I left. He refused to pay me for the work I'd already done, citing some obscure law to delay payment. I refused to meet with him in person or answer his calls, but I kept detailed records of everything, including proof of his lies. Eventually, the time limit for payment ran out, and I reported him to the state. Now there's an open case against him. Additionally, the working conditions in his business were unsanitary and likely illegal. If an investigator were to look into the situation thoroughly, they would probably uncover more violations. I also know I'm not the only employee he's treated this way. Others have experienced similar mistreatment. Since I reported him, he's been bad-mouthing me to a lot of people, trying to tarnish my reputation. Some people seem to think I overreacted, which has left me questioning if I went too far. But from my perspective, I was forced to act because he crossed so many boundaries, exploited me, and then refused to pay me for my work. Reporting him seemed like the only way to protect myself and potentially stop him from doing the same to others. So, am I the asshole for reporting him? Or was I justified in taking action against his abusive and illegal behavior? Am I the asshole for willing to lose a friendship because she brought up my past? So, I, 19F, was hanging out with 2 of my friends, 18F and H, 17F, recently. A is a senior in high school and H is a junior. I graduated earlier this year, and it had been a while since we all hung out, so we decided to meet up at a nearby park. It was my day off from work, and they were free too, so it seemed like a good chance to catch up. Now, here's the thing. A has a history of not respecting my boundaries. I've talked to her about it a few times in the past, but I've always tried to let things slide because I value the friendship. It's annoying, but I usually move on and don't make a big deal out of it. So we meet at the park and I end up buying some snacks and food since I'm the one with the money. As we're talking, A pulls out her phone to show me a picture of a guy she saw at a Comic-Con event. She asked if I thought he was cute, and I responded, I don't find him cute. But then again, you and I have different tastes in men, so it probably doesn't matter. She then said something that really set me off. She casually mentioned, yeah, it doesn't matter because you get cheated on more often than I do. This really caught me off guard. I never expected her to bring up my past relationship issues, especially since she knows how deeply that stuff affects me. Felt like a dig, and I didn't know how to respond. I didn't say anything in the moment, but I mentally knew I was done. After the hangout, I blocked her on everything except for her phone number because I didn't want to deal with it anymore. Later, she noticed I'd blocked her and asked why. I didn't want to explain it, but I did anyway, and I told her that I didn't appreciate her bringing up my past like that and that I was done. She got upset, and I guess H was mad too. So now I'm wondering if I went too far. Did I overreact by blocking her and being willing to end the friendship over this? Or was I justified in cutting her off for bringing up something so personal and hurtful? Am I the asshole for how I handled this? Am I the asshole for my fiancé and I telling our friend we're moving out because our mental and physical health has been going to complete shit? We're also tired of being said friends cash cow, meal ticket, and form of transportation. Asterisk, let me explain a bit more. I'm a 36-year-old woman and I moved in with my fiancé, a 31-year-old man, a few months ago to help him and his friend, a 29-year-old man, out with rent and bills until the lease was supposed to be up in May. It was meant to be a temporary situation where we would all split expenses, but things went south very quickly. The trouble started about a month after I moved in. My fiancé's friend lost his job, and things began to spiral from there. For the last 3 months, my fiancé and I have been paying the entire rent and all the other bills. What makes it worse is that my fiancé's friend has a wife, 28, and 3 kids, aged 8, 6, and 3, plus a dog and 3 cats. My fiancé and I are now providing for not just him, but his entire family and all their animals. We even have 2 cats of our own, which brings the total number of animals in the house to 8. It's been getting ridiculously expensive. The real problem, however, is that my fiancé's friend just refuses to get a job. He's come up with excuse after excuse. I don't want to work in a factory. Fast food is beneath me. I've tried, but nothing's working out. And on and on. He's almost 30, has a wife, 3 kids, and a ton of pets depending on him. It's time to step up and contribute. It's beyond frustrating. On top of the financial strain, there's the emotional and physical toll it's taking on both me and my fiancé. We've been running ourselves ragged, trying to juggle paying for everything, dealing with the kids and animals, and trying to keep up with our own lives. The stress has been so overwhelming. A few days ago, my fiancé had a mental breakdown at work. He's been trying to hold it together for months, but it was too much. Thankfully, our team lead, who we're both close to, helped him get through it. That was the turning point for us. With her guidance, we finally decided that we can't keep doing this anymore. We told his friend that we'd be moving out by January 15th. Of course, his friend started trying to guilt trip us, saying we were abandoning him and his family, that we couldn't just leave them hanging. The thing is, my fiancé is still paying his legal portion of the rent up until the lease is up in May, so we're not leaving them completely stranded. But we are done financially supporting them. We've been pumping money into their household for months now, and we simply cannot continue. I forgot to mention, this whole time my fiancé's friend has also been using his car. My fiancé had his car fixed in July as a birthday gift to himself, and I paid a significant amount of money to get it repaired. My fiancé has only driven his car twice since then because his friend has been using it for himself. So, not only have we been paying rent and bills, but we've also been subsidizing his transportation. At this point, we've had enough. We've given this situation months of our time, money, and energy, and it's taking a huge toll on our mental and physical health. We've been stretched to our breaking points, and we can't keep being his family's safety net. My fiancé finally stood up for himself, and I'm proud of him, but I'm also starting to wonder if we're the ones in the wrong. Are we assholes for deciding to leave early, even though we're still technically paying our portion of the rent? We've been more than generous, and I'm not sure how else to handle this. It feels like we're stuck between being compassionate and protecting our own well-being. So, am I the asshole for moving out, even though we're still paying our share of the rent until May? Should we have stuck it out longer? Or is it time to walk away from this situation? Am I the asshole for not going to my parents' house for Christmas this year? Let me explain the situation. I'm a 26-year-old woman, and this year will be my first Christmas without my husband. He's currently deployed overseas, and while I know that's a part of military life, this holiday feels especially hard. We have a toddler together, and I've been juggling the responsibilities of solo parenting, working, and managing our household on my own since he left in April. Now, about my family. They live nearby, but since my husband left, not one of them has checked in on me. No calls, no texts, not even a visit. It's been completely one-sided. I'm always the one initiating contact, always the one to check in, even though I'm struggling. I'm trying my best to keep things together and make life feel as normal as possible for my toddler, but it's been overwhelming. Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping it together. Every year, my mother hosts a Christmas breakfast, where all of us siblings get together, exchange gifts, and do the typical holiday things. Normally, I've always gone because, well, it's tradition. But this year, as Christmas approaches, I'm really starting to question whether I want to continue participating in something that feels more like a formality than a genuine opportunity to connect with my family. The truth is, I'm frustrated. My family only seems to reach out when there's a holiday to celebrate. Otherwise, my calls and texts go unanswered. I'm tired of putting in all the effort and not getting anything in return. It's been hard enough going through all of this without my husband, and I'm realizing that I'm not getting the support I need from the people who should be there for me. It's not like they're asking how I'm doing, or offering help with my toddler, or checking in on my well-being. Instead, they only come around when it's time to exchange gifts or show up for a photo op. And to be honest, that doesn't feel good anymore. So I've made a decision. I don't want to go to my mom's Christmas breakfast this year. I want to set boundaries. I don't feel like forcing myself to be around people who aren't invested in my life the rest of the year. I'd rather spend the holiday focusing on my toddler and myself, trying to find our own little moments of joy and peace without feeling resentful of the lack of support from my family. Now, I'm wondering if I'm being unreasonable. Am I being a Grinch for deciding not to participate in the Christmas festivities with my family? Or am I justified in wanting to take care of myself this year and prioritize what I need? ITA for not going to my parents' house for Christmas this year? Am I the asshole for getting into a huge fight with my brother on Mother's Day? Let me explain the situation. I'm a 42-year-old woman, and my brother is 44. To put it bluntly, my brother and I have never been particularly close. Growing up, he tormented me, and I mean really went beyond typical sibling rivalry. There were times when he stuck up for me, but honestly, it never really made an impact. Throughout our childhood, he acted like he was better than me and was spoiled by the rest of the family, except for our parents, who tried to keep him grounded. He was always the golden child in their eyes, especially because he's the only male child left to carry on the family name. So, flash forward to this year, and we have an incredibly tense situation. Our mom, who had been recovering from 3 major surgeries the previous year, asked both of us to come over to help around the house on Mother's Day. I had helped her a lot during her recovery, taking her to appointments, assisting with day-to-day tasks, and my brother hadn't been there to help at all. So when our mom asked for his help, I thought it was the least he could do. She also asked my family, my fiancé and our kids, to come over, but said we didn't need to come until lunchtime, so there was no pressure. When we arrived, everything went completely south. I had recently had a baby, and since my brother hadn't met her yet, I went over to introduce her. I was excited for him to meet his niece, But instead of a warm greeting, he immediately told me to get out of his face. I was absolutely shocked and confused, but it didn't end there. He started screaming at me, accusing me of not helping mom enough, which made no sense because, like I said, she had specifically asked him to help. I hadn't been asked, and I was already there to help with whatever she needed. The argument escalated, and at some point, my brother took his kids, who are 15 and 11, out of the house and sat in his car. I was still reeling from his outburst, but I briefly spoke to his wife as I was packing up my baby and getting ready to leave. As I was getting our kids into the car, I overheard him calling my baby a bastard. I froze. I could not believe my ears. We were raised in a family where this kind of language was never used. Our mom was a hippie, and our grandmother always said that babies were blessings, no matter how they came into the world. For him to say that, especially about a baby he'd never even met, felt like a betrayal in a way I can't describe. I was absolutely devastated. Took me a while to even process what had happened. I didn't know what to do. I'm still hurt. Our mom has suggested that I put it behind me and just move forward, forgiving but not forgetting. But right now, I can't see how I can just move on from something like that. The worst part is he came to my wedding, but we barely spoke. My maid of honor even made sure she was between him and my baby during the reception because I just didn't feel safe or comfortable around him anymore. I can't help but think about how I would have reacted if the tables were turned. I would never speak about my nephews that way. Just because two people are raised in the same household doesn't mean they share the same values or perspective. I'm trying to figure out if I'm being unreasonable by not wanting to forgive him right now, or if my feelings are valid. So, am I the asshole for getting into a huge fight with my brother on Mother's Day and struggling to forgive him for what he said about my baby? Should I just put it behind me like my mom says? Or is it okay to feel this hurt and distance myself from him? Am I the asshole for leaving my friends because I found their behavior immature and offensive? Let me explain. I'm 14 years old, living in the Philippines, and recently I made the decision to leave my group of friends because I couldn't tolerate their behavior anymore. My friends are mostly around my age, 14 to 15, and I've been friends with them for a few years, but over time, I realized their behavior was affecting me negatively. It all started with a guy named John, 14. I met him back in 7th grade, and when I first got to know him, I noticed that he had a pretty toxic sense of humor. He would joke about things like racism, fascism, sexism, and homophobia, and at first I didn't like him much because of that. But I eventually got used to him and thought maybe we could get along. However, he never really grew out of those toxic jokes. He'd make racist slurs like the N-word and glorify things like Nazi ideology. I didn't agree with it at all, and it bothered me, but I still tried to tolerate it because he was fun in other ways. Later on, during summer school, I met another friend of John's, Shad, 14. Shad was even weirder and more extreme than John. He would watch H*Antai in class and talk about the same things. Racist jokes, homophobia, and glorifying horrible events like slavery and Nazi Germany. One time, he even suggested those themes for our Christmas party. Things like Bring Back Slavery and N*Z Germany. I tried to tell him it wasn't funny, but he didn't take me seriously at all. It was clear that he just didn't care about the impact of his words. Over time, I started realizing that my emotional intelligence was higher than theirs, and I understood that they saw their offensive humor as just for fun. I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. They were toxic, immature, and never took responsibility for their actions. They just acted like nothing was wrong and kept going. One incident that really pushed me to my breaking point was when my stuff got disturbed. I had bought some school supplies with my own money, and they were damaged and hidden. I got really angry about it, but I didn't want to hurt anyone, so I kept my distance instead. To make it worse, Shad made a comment about me being embarrassing for getting upset over it. He said something like, crashing out like a toddler is embarrassing, aura, which really irked me. I told him he had no right to say that, especially since he constantly relied on me for school supplies. I even accidentally hit his hand in the moment and immediately apologized. But he didn't care. Their behavior kept getting worse. They would joke about gory and disturbing topics like snuff videos, which made me feel disgusted. They never took responsibility for their bad grades or their behavior. Instead of trying to improve, they'd complain and expect others to fix things for them. I realized that their immaturity was draining me, and I couldn't stand it anymore. I tried talking to another friend of theirs, Vestro 14, about how I felt, and surprisingly, he was supportive. He agreed with me and told me that leaving the group was a good decision because I wasn't the problem, they were. After that, I decided to cut all contact and leave the group completely, including on social media. Now, I feel a little conflicted. Most of them aren't as fortunate as I am, and I can understand why they might act the way they do. But I don't think that excuses their behavior or their lack of self-improvement. They talk about loving God but act in ways that contradict the basic values of decency and responsibility. So, I guess my question is, am I the asshole for leaving this group of friends because their behavior was draining and offensive to me? Was I wrong to walk away? Or should I have stuck around and tried to help them change? I'm open to hearing if I made a mistake so I can learn from it and improve as a person. Am I the asshole for airing private words? Let me explain what happened. I, 24M, have been friends with a group of people for years, and recently, I found out that one of my friends, Bill, also 24, has stopped speaking to me. I started wondering if I might be in the wrong. So here's the story. There's a girl in our group, Tina, who has an undeniably curvy figure. She's large-chested, has a little bit of a belly, and, to put it bluntly, has a junk in the trunk type of body. Some people might see it as a blessing, others might think it's a curse, but either way, she's undeniably attractive. Bill, one of my longtime friends, has an obvious crush on her, although Tina doesn't seem to know it. Last summer, our group had a rooftop pool party with a potluck. While the guys were setting up the food, the girls went to change. Tina came out in a two-piece swimsuit, and Bill made some filthy jokes about her body. To summarize, he said things like, it should be illegal for her not to star in dirty videos, and made crude comments about the size of her chest, implying she was supposed to act a certain way because of it. At the time, it was all jokes, but they were definitely disrespectful and inappropriate. A little while later, Tina came out in a sundress and a girl jacket that didn't zip up, so she was covering up. She wasn't getting into the pool, and after a bit, one of the girls went over to ask if she was okay. That's when I, somewhat buzzed, yelled out, Bill was being a creep, and now she doesn't want to swim. It's Bill's fault. I then started chanting shame and yelled out everything Bill had said about Tina's body. Bill turned beet red, and Tina's face immediately fell. The group immediately started arguing about it. Tina said she wasn't swimming because she didn't want to look like she was doing it on purpose. She didn't know what Bill had said, but she mentioned feeling like it was inappropriate. She said she was tired and decided to go home. After that, the whole vibe of the party changed. Tina left, and things were a little tense. The girls in our group defended Tina, but most of the guys seemed to think that since Bill hadn't said anything directly to Tina or in earshot of her, it wasn't that bad. They argued that it wasn't disrespectful because Tina didn't hear it. But I disagreed. I thought it was weird and inappropriate. It's not her fault that she looks the way she does, just like it's not my fault if someone thinks I'm unattractive. Here's where I think I might be the asshole. After the incident, Tina never spoke to Bill again. She avoids him now, and she hasn't addressed it directly, but she made it clear she didn't want anything to do with him. The issue is, Tina never heard what Bill said, and I'm the one who made it public. Bill didn't say anything to her face, and I'm the one who aired it all out. I didn't think through the consequences of my actions in that moment. Bill felt comfortable saying those things around me because, in our friend group, we all joke around a lot, including me. I've made my share of crude jokes, so maybe that made him think I was cool with that kind of humor. But now I realize that I'm the reason Tina found out, and it's my fault that the whole situation went south. To make matters worse, since I called Bill out publicly, Tina started distancing herself from him, and now the whole group is cold toward him. He's been excluded from hangouts and hasn't been invited to things, but I didn't notice until recently that he was deliberately not talking to me either. The whole situation has become more awkward than I thought it would be, and I can't help but feel guilty. So, Am I the asshole for airing out private words and causing a huge rift between my friends? Should I have kept quiet? Or was I justified in calling out Bill for his behavior? I'm feeling like I might have overstepped, but I don't know if I handled this the wrong way. Am I the asshole for not inviting my friends anymore? I'm a 39-year-old woman, married, with no children, and I work from home with a flexible schedule. I've had the same group of friends for a long time, 2 from high school and 1 I met 4 years ago. I've always been the one to organize our outings and check in on everyone, but lately, I've been feeling a bit burned out from it all. Here's why. Friend 1 is also 39, works remotely, is introverted, and is raising her nephew as her own child. Friend 2 is 39, works in an office, is outgoing, and recently remarried, but has no children. Friend 3 is 27, an office worker, and we became friends as co-workers. She has a long-term boyfriend, no kids. I've always been the one to initiate plans with them, and for the most part, I've been okay with it. But recently, things have been feeling one-sided. Here's the most recent situation that made me rethink things. A month ago, I organized an outing with Friend 1 and Friend 2 to a place that required advance booking. I gave them a month's notice, and while Friend 1 confirmed, Friend 2 said she'd check and let me know. I didn't invite Friend 3 because I wanted it to be a high school friends meetup. 2 days before the outing, Friend 1 canceled, saying her son had a soccer game. Fair enough. I get that children's events take priority, but it didn't sit right with me. Friend 2, seeing this, immediately said she had a class to attend. I understood, but I felt hurt that she didn't give me a heads up earlier when she saw Friend 1 cancel. The lack of communication and consideration felt off. I started to feel frustrated because I'm always the one initiating plans, and it seems like my efforts are never reciprocated. My husband suggested inviting one of his couple friends. They were excited to come, but the reservations were full by the time they could book. Still, they made an effort to see us, and it felt really nice to have that kind of energy around. In the end, it was just my husband and me on the outing. It was fun, but I couldn't help but feel a little bitter. I realized that I was the one always reaching out and organizing plans, and that none of my friends ever made the effort to initiate anything. This realization made me question the nature of these friendships. I shared my feelings with my therapist, who bluntly asked, "How does it feel to know these friendships only exist in your head?" It stung, but I knew deep down that I was the only one keeping these friendships alive. That's when I decided to stop initiating contact and see what would happen. Around the same time, I came across a post on Instagram titled, "When did we go from being a low-maintenance friendship to not being friends at all?" It resonated so much that I sent it to Friend 1. She didn't respond to the message, but instead sent me a random reel, which felt like a brush off. I tried to bring it up to Friend 2, and she apologized, saying she'd do better, but nothing changed. Friend 3 occasionally invites me out, but it's always during weeknights, which I jokingly refer to as mistress hours. I've told her that weekends work better for me, but she's always busy with other people. It felt like she only had time for me when it was convenient for her. So, I've decided to step back from these friendships. I don't want to be the only one putting in the effort anymore. I've started to reconnect with an old college friend, and I can feel that this new connection might lead to a more balanced and fulfilling friendship. Now, I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong for stepping back from my current friendships. Am I being too sensitive or unfair by not inviting them anymore and not making the effort to reach out? Should I have just kept trying? Or is it okay for me to let go of relationships that don't prioritize me? ITA for stepping back from these friendships? Am I the asshole for not being quiet in my apartment? I'm a 30-year-old woman living alone in an apartment. I've been here for 2 years now and work from home, so my schedule is pretty flexible. During the day, I usually make food, watch TV, or talk on the phone during my breaks. I wouldn't say it's anything excessive, but you can definitely tell someone's living here. It's not crazy loud, but there is noise, like you can hear my TV, the occasional phone call, etc. For the most part, my neighbors have been extremely loud. I think they have about 7 to 8 people living there, and they're often yelling, sometimes angry, sometimes happy, playing loud music or blasting TV shows/movies at all hours. They've even had parties that go until 2 to 3 a.m. on weekdays, several times a month. It's definitely disruptive, but I never complained about it or knocked on their door. I understand that living in an apartment means some noise is inevitable, and I've always just thrown in earplugs when it's too much. But recently they had a baby, and suddenly, the noise level from their apartment has dropped dramatically, since the baby wakes up at almost any noise. I guess they're trying to keep it quiet so the baby can sleep. But now, when I go about my day and make normal sounds, watching TV, talking on the phone, etc., I've started getting knocks on the wall or even at my door telling me to quiet down. I'm not being ridiculously loud, and I've always been understanding of their noise before, but I've had enough. So, I told them I wouldn't be any quieter in my apartment, because I'm just living my life and working from home. They didn't respond well to this, and now I'm wondering if I should have been more courteous. So, am I the asshole for not being quiet in my apartment *** and telling them I won't reduce the noise I make during the day? Should I have been more considerate of the fact that they have a baby now? Or am I just entitled to live my life as I normally would? Am I the asshole for making plans with my own money even though I owe my mother? I'm a 16-year-old girl, F16, living with my single mother and her parents. We're in a working-class neighborhood, and while my mom has a good job, she spends a lot on nice things like holidays, school activities, and other extras. I'd say we're lower middle class. Here's the situation. In my country, students can skip the 4th year of secondary school and go straight from 3rd to 5th year. However, my mom insisted that I do something called transition year. It's a non-academic year with trips, workshops, and projects, and it costs money. I personally think it's a waste of time and money, and I'd have preferred just moving straight into 5th year, but I've been going along with it. Now, in October, my cousin, 13 years old, stayed with us for 2 weeks due to some personal issues in her family. She used my room while she was here, and after she left, I accidentally cracked the corner of my iPad screen by sitting on it. Long story short, it was under a stool when I sat down. I didn't really think much of it at first because the screen still worked and it was a minor crack. However, when my mom noticed it weeks later, she said I'd need to pay her back €100 for the repair. The problem is, I don't have a job, and my weekly allowance is between €10 to €15, which I use for school lunches and occasionally going out with friends. Sometimes I skip lunch to save up for other things. So, I don't have the money to just pay €100 back right away. With Christmas coming up, I wanted to get my nails done. Just a simple gel extension for €15. I asked my mom if I could go this weekend, but she told me I couldn't afford it, especially since I was also going ice skating on the 29th. I did the math in my head. Ice skating would cost about €30, including transportation, skating, and snacks. I currently have €32 on my card, and with my allowance coming this Saturday, I'd have €52 by the time ice skating comes around. If I spent €15 on my nails this weekend, I'd still have enough money for ice skating so I can afford both activities. I tried to explain this to my mom, but she wasn't listening. She insisted that I needed to pay her back for the iPad first, and when I pointed out that if I skipped both activities, it would still take ages for me to repay her since I have no income, she called me greedy. I got frustrated and snapped. I told her I wouldn't pay her back at all or buy her a Christmas gift. I feel guilty for saying that, but honestly, it feels like she's all about the money, and I don't have a way to pay her back quickly. Now I'm wondering if I was in the wrong for making my own plans with my money, even though I owe her. I regret snapping at her, but I feel like she's not being reasonable. So, AITA for prioritizing my own plans and not wanting to pay her back immediately, especially when I feel like I can't afford it. Am I the asshole for starting to blame my mother for my possibly messed up head? I'm a 22-year-old woman from Australia, and I feel like I'm at my breaking point. I've lived a pretty sheltered life and, until recently, I always thought my family situation was normal. But now that I'm entering adulthood and trying to figure out who I am, I'm realizing that my upbringing may have been a lot more toxic than I ever acknowledged. Here's some context. I grew up in a family where my parents were always fighting, loud arguments, violence, you name it. That's been the constant for as long as I can remember, and it still happens today. Despite all this, I still live with my parents because I'm not allowed to move out. I'm starting to feel like it's suffocating me, but at the same time, I love my family and we do have good times together. Let me introduce you to the key players in my family. My little sister, 18. She's a sweet person, but she's been homeschooled since she was 15, which I feel was heavily influenced by my mother. She doesn't have any friends and rarely leaves the house except for her part-time job, which my mom controls by limiting her to just 2 days a week. My dad. He works full-time and doesn't talk much. We don't have a close relationship, which has kind of damaged me, but I try to move past it. My mom. She's been a stay-at-home mom my entire life. While she's always been there for me and my sister, she has some obsessive behaviors that are starting to make me feel crazy. She spends almost the entire day cleaning, from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. The house has to be spotless all the time, and if I don't help enough, I get yelled at and told that I'm lazy. Even though I work full-time and help with the cleaning as much as I can, it's never enough. She also monitors everything I eat and gets upset if I don't eat the way she thinks I should. If I want to relax, I get guilt-tripped. If I take time for myself or hang out with my boyfriend, she makes me feel like I'm being selfish for not helping with chores. The house is so perfectly clean that it doesn't even feel like a home anymore. It feels more like a display model. If I drop something on the floor, I get yelled at. It's draining. To make things worse, she has controlled almost every aspect of my life. I had to turn down a proposal from my boyfriend because I knew my mom wouldn't approve of me moving on with my life. I feel stuck. She even tried to end my relationship at the start, accusing my boyfriend of horrible things he didn't do, just because he's from a family with health issues and because he's not perfect in her eyes. I feel like a prisoner in my own life. I'm scared to start university again because I know I'll be expected to drop everything to clean. And when I tried university the last time, my mom made it so difficult that I ended up dropping out, which she actually praised because it meant I could help clean more. It feels like I can't do anything for myself without her either making me feel guilty or trying to control me. My mom has even tried to control my boyfriend's life, telling him what he should eat and how he should live because she doesn't want me to move out. The worst part is that she still won't let me live my life. I have to get her permission to do almost anything. If I try to go out with friends or my boyfriend, I'm guilt-tripped and told how much she needs me at home. It's so emotionally exhausting that I just want to scream and run away. I can't even be happy for myself without worrying about how it will affect my mom. I'm considering leaving my boyfriend because I don't want him to put his life on hold for me. But at the same time, I feel like I've been robbed of the chance to live a normal life. I can't even enjoy simple moments like getting into university or achieving something for myself without feeling guilty. I just want to escape and be free. I love my family, but I feel like my mom has ruined me as a person. I feel stuck, trapped, and like I'm losing myself. I'm starting to resent her, and I hate that I feel this way. So Reddit, AITA for starting to blame my mother for my mental health struggles and wanting to run away to start fresh. Even though I love her deeply and know she loves me, am I the asshole for not wanting to be in the house while my mom has fun? I, 21F, live with my mother, 38F, and pay rent for my room in the house. We have an unspoken rule in our household: no fun or company when anyone is home. And by fun, I mean when my mom has a guy over or engages in anything that I'd rather not witness, given how thin the walls are and how close our rooms are. My room is next to hers, and I hear everything, no matter how quiet she tries to be. Recently, my mom met this guy who has stood her up a couple of times, and I've been understanding about it. I figured, okay, maybe he's not the best guy, but it's her choice. She agreed to not have him around when I'm at home, mainly because I'm not comfortable with it. I don't want to hear their private time through the walls. But last night, after all the previous times he stood her up, he shows up again, right when I'm home. It's about midnight, and I can hear their bed creaking, which made me lose it. I went into her room and I was absolutely furious. I ended up giving her an ultimatum. I told her that if he comes over again while I'm there, I'll either call the police or kick him out myself. I feel bad for getting so angry, but at the same time, I felt completely disgusted and violated in my own home. I've tried to set boundaries with her before, telling her that it's uncomfortable and disrespectful to have company over when I'm at home, but it always feels like my boundaries are ignored or worse, she starts crying and saying that it's disrespectful for me to have boundaries with my parent. I've always gone out of my way to give her space when she's asked me to, and I thought this was a reasonable request. So now, I'm wondering, am I the asshole for getting so upset and making this ultimatum? Or was I in the right to feel this way given the situation? Am I the asshole AITA for asking my roommates to move out? My 26F husband, 33M, and I have a house together. My brother, 26M, was homeless for a bit, so we took him in. He's been living in a camper in our driveway. We have spare rooms, but he wanted his own space. Recently, his girlfriend, 25F, moved into the camper with him. Things were fine, but now it's been increasingly tough. We have expressed that my husband needs the bathroom between 11 and 11:30, but, like clockwork, the girlfriend ends up in the bathroom during that time frame. We added her onto our phone plan. I should add she is my best friend, and bought her a newer iPhone because she really needed it. The agreed upon plan was that she would pay the $15 a month for her service, but that never happened. She made maybe 1 or 2 payments and then nothing. The phone is now completely paid off, so we took it off our phone plan. When we gave her the heads up, all she said was, "Yeah, I just won't have any service. It's whatever. We have a house rule that you clean out the shower drain whenever you use it because it gets clogged fast. We have to keep bottles of Drano on hand because of it. Not only do they both not clean out the shower, she uses a sugar scrub that attracted ants. So my husband would go get ready for work but has to deep clean the shower to get the ants out. We allow them to store some things in the house, but it's starting to feel like a lot. When my husband's grandmother moved out, the girlfriend texted her asking grandma to move her things out of the closet or she would put them in the basement. They love to put their extra food in our fridge and freezer. I just had to clean out their Thanksgiving leftovers and wash all the pans because they kept forgetting. It's almost Christmas. We only charge them $100 a week for rent. They have access to Wi-Fi, electricity, water, extra storage, the kitchen and bathroom. Pretty much everything is included. Well, they stopped paying rent for roughly 4 months but continued to access everything like normal. When we asked about rent, they would tell us they aren't making enough to buy food, let alone pay rent. My brother is the only one working trying to support both of them. His girlfriend refuses to get a job because of mental health. I completely understand that. I've taken a break myself due to mental health, but I reached out and got help. She isn't trying to get a doctor or find therapy. She's sitting in the camper playing video games and scrolling Twitter all day. We've decided we're turning the Wi-Fi off when we're all at work so she can't do those things anymore. So because of all this, we've asked them to start looking for a place. My brother has expressed not being able to support both of them and find a new place on one income. I feel bad, but I also feel like it's not my problem. Sounds harsh, but it's how I feel. My husband and I both feel used, like they aren't grateful for the 5 years of help we've given them. Are we the a-holes? Am I the asshole if I didn't get my BF any Christmas presents? My BF, 41M, and I, almost 41F, have been together 3.5 years now. We live together. He's usually a good partner, but we're both very broken people and tend to get into fights. He's also an alcoholic. While I love my partner dearly, he just can't seem to get his shit together. He doesn't have a car or a real bank account, nor any post-secondary education. He's mostly waited tables all his adult life. I changed careers 2 years ago, but I recently ended up in a position that doesn't pay very well. I make just enough to barely cover my bills and expenses. I have scrimped, saved, and sacrificed. I have a car, but it's barely hanging on. I started saving $20 a paycheck for Christmas shopping money and have lent my talents for extra cash, but I only have just over $100 to work with. 2 weeks ago, my BF quit his job before securing a new one first. He does this sometimes. While he did make an arrangement with his mother to cover his share of the rent because I cannot, I know. He will not be getting me anything for Christmas. He has been applying for jobs daily, however. I have 8 nibblings and a mother to shop for, and I'm already having to go super cheap on them. I was planning on getting my BF some nice things he really wants/needs. I already bought a pair of work pants for him weeks ago, so he's definitely getting those, but if I'm not going to get anything from him, I wonder if it would be fair or shitty if I didn't get anything for him. Wibda if I didn't? Am I the asshole for not prioritizing someone who isn't close to me anymore? Please forgive any mistakes in how I'm writing this. I'm a 30-year-old woman, and this is my first time sharing something like this online, so I'm not entirely sure where to start. I was friends with a woman who's now 28 for over 15 years. Back when we were younger, I always tried to be there for her and went out of my way to help whenever I could. She seemed to have a lot of personal struggles, and there were always reasons why she didn't have many friends. I felt like I needed to support her because, at the time, I cared deeply about our friendship. But as the years went by, her behavior started to change in ways that made it difficult to maintain our relationship. She became someone I couldn't have an honest conversation with because anything I said that she disagreed with would lead to an argument or her ghosting me entirely. Even when she made decisions that were clearly impulsive or problematic, like getting a breed of dog she wasn't prepared to care for or going back to a boyfriend who treated her horribly, I wasn't allowed to voice my concerns without risking a blow-up. At one point, she had to move in with me. I asked her for $50 a week to help cover the bills for the house, which I thought was a reasonable request. She refused to pay, claiming she couldn't afford it because she had to cover the train fare for her job, which was an hour away at Sephora, and to see her boyfriend, who was honestly a terrible influence on her life. Later, she asked to move into my parents' house, which was about an hour away. For reasons I still don't fully understand, she expected me to be the one driving back and forth whenever she needed to be there or do something related to that arrangement. I repeatedly told her that I couldn't cater to her schedule like that, and she acted like I was being unreasonable. This back and forth strained our relationship further, and we had several arguments during that time. Things came to a head when she broke up with her boyfriend and suddenly wanted to act like we were best friends again. By that point, I was fed up with her behavior. I told her clearly that I was tired of the cycle of her disappearing, reappearing, and expecting me to drop everything for her. I decided to step back and take some space for my own mental well-being. She had left some of her belongings at my house, and over the months that followed, she came by multiple times to pick them up, yet somehow never managed to take everything. This included times when she had an empty car and could have easily taken it all. During this period, I was still driving 3 hours round trip to visit her occasionally. Eventually, her mom bought her a car, and instead of focusing on getting her life together, she started talking to her ex again. I reminded her of all the times he had kicked her out and how I had to house and financially support her because of it. I told her I needed space and took that step for my own sanity. Fast forward a little. I hurt my back, and it was worse than I'd ever experienced before. I had always assumed it was just pulled muscles, but this time, a visit to the emergency room revealed I had degenerative disc disease. The pain was so severe I could barely walk without for pain medication. Feeling vulnerable, I reached out to her, desperate for someone to talk to, and she ghosted me. I even apologized for the way I had reacted in the past and tried to explain why I had been upset, but she never responded. 8 months went by, and out of nowhere, she messaged me about some random items she had left at my place and at my parents' house. By this point, my parents were selling their home, and my partner and I had been clearing out and reorganizing our space to make it easier for me to navigate and rest comfortably. Most of the things she left behind had been either discarded or donated because she'd ignored me for months and had ample opportunities to take her stuff. The only thing of hers I might still have is a single item that I don't even know the location of, and honestly, I don't care to look. Am I the asshole for not wanting to waste my time and energy searching for something for someone who owes me hundreds of dollars and hasn't been there for me when I needed her? Some additional context to give you an idea of the kind of behavior I've put up with over the years. She once got into a heated argument with me because I asked her not to boil her menstrual cup in the same pans I use for cooking. She insisted on sleeping in my room for an entire month, despite my protests. During that time, she would cry all night and demand that we only watch one specific TV show because it was the only thing that comforted her. To this day, I can't enjoy that show because of the negative association. She would take excessively long showers, and when I asked her to shorten them, she accused me of being unreasonable and controlling. I've held so much of this in for so long, but now I don't care anymore. I'm done catering to her endless demands, excuses, and drama. So, Am I wrong for not prioritizing her needs after everything I've been through with her? Am I the asshole for snapping at my mom for telling people I'm gay? I, 20M, have a younger sister, 14F, who loves to read, and yesterday, while she was engrossed in one of her books, she asked me a seemingly harmless question. What does a Greek god look like? I was curious and asked why she wanted to know. She showed me a passage in the book describing a guy as having the features of a Greek god. I chuckled and answered, muscular and handsome. That should have been the end of it, but I noticed my mom staring at me with a strange, almost knowing look. Feeling a bit uneasy, I asked her if something was wrong. She brushed it off with a simple, nothing. But later that evening, she dropped a bomb on me. In the middle of an unrelated conversation, she asked, "Do you like your best friend, Ryan, 20M? He's tall and muscular." I was floored. My mom had apparently been harboring this idea that Ryan and I were gay. For context, Ryan and I are incredibly close. He's been my best friend since childhood, and we're practically brothers. But that's all it is. I assured her that there was no truth to her assumption. Her response? She didn't believe me. She insisted that the way Ryan and I interact, our jokes, our shared interests, and how often we hang out, left her no other possible interpretation. I was frustrated but tried to keep calm, explaining to her that she was reading into things that weren't there. I thought the conversation was over until she dropped another bombshell. She had already told her friends that I'm gay but haven't come out to her yet. She said she was worried about me, bottling things up inside, and wanted advice on how to support me. At that moment, I snapped. I raised my voice, asking her why she would make such an assumption and, worse, why she would share such a personal and unfounded claim with her friends. She defended herself, saying she acted out of love and concern. Here's the kicker. One of the friends she told has a daughter I've been crushing on for months. I've been trying to muster the courage to ask her out, and now I'm terrified that this rumor will make things awkward or ruin my chances. I tried to explain this to my mom, but she didn't seem to grasp the gravity of what she had done. I told her that while I have absolutely no issue with people being gay, it's frustrating and uncomfortable to have people assume something about me that isn't true, especially when it could have real social consequences. Now I'm left wondering if I was too harsh. My mom genuinely thought she was being supportive, but her actions have caused me a lot of stress and embarrassment. On the other hand, I feel like she overstepped a boundary by assuming my sexuality and sharing her assumptions with others. So, was I wrong for snapping at her? Am I the asshole for banning my friend from my home after she refused to take videos of my bird down? 2 years ago, I adopted an African gray parrot who had suffered from severe neglect. When I first brought her home, she was timid and wary of people, and it took months of patience and care to earn her trust. Now, she's the most loving, vibrant bird, in my completely unbiased opinion. African greys are known for their intelligence and sociability, so she thrives on attention and interaction, especially from my close friends who adore her. One of her favorite things to do is sing along to her favorite Disney songs. She'll indicate when she wants the music on, and I'm more than happy to oblige. It's a heartwarming and funny quirk of hers that everyone loves. Recently, I stumbled across something that made me deeply uncomfortable. I was browsing through my friend's YouTube channel, looking for an old video of a mutual friend who passed away, when I found 6 videos of my parrot singing Disney songs. She had filmed these moments without my knowledge or permission and uploaded them for the world to see. First, I was stunned. While I understand the videos might seem cute or harmless, the situation didn't sit right with me. After all, this is a bird who endured trauma and neglect before finding a safe home with me. To see her essentially exploited for online views felt wrong, especially given how long it took to build her trust. When I confronted my friend about it, she brushed me off, saying it was harmless and that it was nice to share cute moments and document them for the future. I pointed out that if her intentions were as innocent as she claimed, she wouldn't have uploaded the videos without telling me. I asked her to take them down, but she flat out refused. Her refusal left me no choice but to draw a boundary. I told her she wasn't welcome in my home until she removed the videos because I couldn't trust her not to record or upload more content without my consent. This made her furious. She argued that it wasn't a big deal, saying, "It's just a bird. It's not like I'm exploiting a child or anything." She then shared the story with our mutual friends, framing me as unreasonable. While most of them agree that what she did was weird and inappropriate, a couple think I overreacted, saying it's just a bird and that I'm being overly sensitive. Here's why I feel justified. My parrot may not be a child, but she's a living being who I've worked hard to protect and care for. My home is her safe space, and I have every right to decide how her image is used, especially since the videos weren't just for private enjoyment, they were public. Still, I can't shake the thought that I may have come across too harsh. Could I have handled the situation better? Am I overreacting by banning her from my home until she removes the videos? This situation feels gross to me, and I feel betrayed by a friend who should have respected my boundaries. But now I'm questioning if my response was disproportionate. What do you think? Am I the asshole for refusing to call my friend by her new name, Queen? A friend of mine, 25F, recently decided to socially change her name. She's not transgender, so this isn't about affirming her gender identity. Rather, she explained that this is part of a personal reinvention. She wants her new name to reflect how she sees herself and how she wants others to perceive her. Her chosen name? Queen. She's fully embraced this identity. Her social media profiles all use Queen, and she introduces herself to new people by that name. Most of her newer acquaintances know her only as Queen. In our friend group, however, it's been more challenging. Those of us who have known her for years occasionally slip up and call her by her birth name. While she's not confrontational about it, you can tell it bothers her when it happens. She'll gently correct us if the group is small, but usually lets it slide in larger settings. I fully respect her right to choose her own name. It's her identity, her life, and her autonomy. However, I've been struggling with her specific choice of name. Queen doesn't feel like a name to me. It feels more like a title, a term of praise or reverence. When someone refers to someone as a queen or king, it's often meant as a compliment or an acknowledgement of admiration. And frankly, I just don't feel that way about her. If she had chosen a name that means queen, like Reina or Regina, I wouldn't have an issue at all. But calling her Queen directly feels awkward and insincere. To me, it feels less like a name and more like she's asking me to validate an idealized version of herself that I don't personally see. I've tried to avoid using her name altogether, which works most of the time. If I absolutely need to use a name, I make an effort to say Queen, but it doesn't always come naturally, especially if I'm annoyed or not in a good mood. Once, I asked if I could call her Q as a compromise, but she was firm. My name is Queen. To be honest, her personality might be playing a role in how I feel about this. She can be a bit self-centered at times, which makes it harder for me to embrace calling her by a name that feels so grand. I can't help but wonder if my discomfort would be lessened if her new name weren't tied so closely to an image of herself as someone who deserves admiration and reverence. Some mutual friends have told me I'm overthinking it. If she wants to be called Queen, just call her Queen, they say. And I get that, it's a name and it doesn't cost me much to just use it. But every time I do, it feels a little forced. So, am I the asshole for refusing to fully embrace her new name? Or is it reasonable to feel uncomfortable calling a peer by a name that feels more like a title? Am I the asshole for not giving my younger brother my gaming console because he broke his? I'm 16M, and my younger brother Jack, 12M, has a history of being careless with his belongings. Last year, our parents gifted him a PlayStation 5 for his birthday. He was over the moon about it, but his excitement didn't translate into taking care of it. He left it lying on the floor, threw his controller around, and constantly ate snacks and drank soda near it, despite multiple warnings. A couple of weeks ago, his recklessness caught up to him. He spilled soda all over the PS5, and it completely stopped working. Our parents were firm and told him he wouldn't get a replacement, explaining that it was his responsibility to take care of his things. Since then, Jack has been begging to use my Xbox Series X. I've told him no every single time. My reasoning? I worked a summer job and saved up to buy my Xbox. It wasn't handed to me as a gift. I earned it. Because of that, I'm meticulous about keeping it in good condition. Given Jack's track record, I don't trust him to be careful with it. Jack, of course, doesn't see it that way. He thinks I'm being selfish and unfair. He's called me mean for not letting him use my console, and our parents are split on the issue. My dad supports me, saying that it's my property and I have every right to set boundaries. My mom, on the other hand, feels that I'm being too harsh. She's argued that he's just a kid and that I should help him out. But here's the thing. I'm not trying to punish him out of spite. I genuinely believe this is an important lesson for him. If I just hand over my Xbox after he destroyed his PlayStation, what message does that send? That it's okay to be careless because someone else will always bail him out? Despite my reasoning, my mom and Jack keep trying to guilt-trip me. They've pointed out that I'm the older brother and that I should be setting a good example by sharing. But I can't shake the fear that if I let him use my Xbox, it's only a matter of time before something happens to it. So now I'm stuck questioning myself. Am I being overly harsh? Is this more about teaching him a lesson than about protecting my property? Or am I justified in standing my ground? Am I the asshole for refusing to let my brother use my gaming console, even though he doesn't have one anymore? Am I the asshole for telling my friend I can't be his best man because his fiancée tried to ban me from his bachelor party? My friend Mike and I have been tight for over a decade. We've seen each other through all kinds of highs and lows, so when he got engaged, it was no surprise he asked me to be his best man. I was honored and ready to take on the role. That is, until his fiancée, Jess, started getting involved. Jess has always been a bit particular. She likes things done her way, and while that's fine most of the time, her involvement in Mike's bachelor party planning turned into something else entirely. She insisted on knowing every detail: who was coming, where we were going, and what we planned to do. At first, I chalked it up to her just being curious or wanting reassurance that we weren't planning anything too wild. Then she dropped the bomb. Jess told Mike I wasn't allowed to attend the bachelor party. Her reason? A couple of years ago, I posted a picture of her dog on Instagram with the caption, "The ugliest dog I've ever seen." It was meant as a joke, and to be fair, the dog had a goofy, funny face that I thought even she found amusing. I honestly didn't think it was a big deal at the time, but apparently, she's been holding on to that grudge ever since. Mike explained the situation to me, saying Jess didn't want me there and he needed to keep the peace. I thought the whole thing was absurd, but I didn't want to stir up drama, so I told him I'd sit this one out if that's what he needed. I figured we'd move past it. But then things escalated. A few days later, Mike called me to say Jess wanted me to step back from being the best man entirely. She said I wasn't mature enough and didn't take things seriously. That was it for me. Couldn't believe it. This is a guy I've been friends with for 10 years, and now his fiancée, over a joke about her dog, is deciding I'm not fit to stand by his side on his wedding day? I told Mike that if I wasn't good enough to be his best man, then I wasn't good enough to attend the wedding at. Well, it felt like a line had been crossed, and I wasn't willing to sit there and watch Jess control everything while my relationship with Mike was pushed aside. Mike is now furious. He says I'm making this all about myself and causing unnecessary drama during what's supposed to be a happy time in his life. I understand he's in a tough spot, but I can't shake the feeling that Jess is the one causing the real drama here by trying to micromanage everything, including his friendships. Some of our mutual friends think I should have just sucked it up and gone along with it for Mike's sake. Others agree that Jess's behavior is controlling and that I was right to stand my ground. So, am I the asshole for refusing to be part of Mike's wedding after his fiancée tried to ban me from the bachelor party? Or should I have handled this differently? Am I the asshole for refusing to let my brother borrow my car for his wedding after he trashed it the last time? I, 34M, own a car that I worked incredibly hard to afford. It's not a high-end luxury vehicle, but it's something I take a lot of pride in because I saved for years to buy it. I keep it in pristine condition, clean, well-maintained, and always in great shape. My younger brother, 31M, is getting married soon, and he asked if he could borrow my car for his wedding day. Specifically, he wants to use it for the wedding exit because, in his words, it looks better than his. At first, I considered it because I understand how important this day is to him. However, I quickly remembered the last time he borrowed my car a couple of years ago. Back then, he asked to use it for a weekend trip and I agreed. But when he returned it, it was a disaster. The car was filthy with trash everywhere. Fast food wrappers, drink bottles, and crumbs all over the seats. On top of that, there was a scratch on the side, and he returned it with an almost empty gas tank. He didn't apologize or offer to fix the scratch. Instead, he laughed it off, saying, "It's just a car, man." That experience left a bad taste in my mouth, and I decided then that I wouldn't let him borrow my car again. So, when he asked to use it for the wedding, I said no. He immediately got upset and accused me of being dramatic. "It's just one day," he argued, and tried to downplay what happened before as a small mistake from years ago. Now my parents are getting involved, saying I'm being selfish and that it's family, so I should just let it go for the sake of the wedding. My brother is telling everyone I'm trying to ruin his special day over something insignificant, and it's making me feel guilty. But here's the thing. I worked hard for this car, and I take good care of it. My brother has shown in the past that he doesn't respect my property, so why should I trust him now? Weddings can be chaotic, and the last thing I want is to have my car returned in worse condition again. While I feel bad for adding to his wedding stress, I don't think I'm being unreasonable. Trust is earned, and he hasn't shown me that I can trust him with something as important to me as my car. So, am I the asshole for refusing to let my brother borrow my car? Or am I right to stand my ground? Am I the asshole for not chasing down the waitress? My family and I, husband and 2 teenage kids, went out to a Tex-Mex restaurant recently. The food and service were decent and we were having a good time until a massive party of about 30 people walked in. Understandably, this threw our waitress into overdrive. She suddenly had a ton of tables to handle, and things started to slow down. My husband ordered a second beer, and it took a little longer than usual to arrive. He started to get annoyed but managed to let it slide. However, when it came time for the check, the delay really set him off. He handed the waitress his debit card as she passed by and got upset when she didn't come back right away with the receipt. She was clearly overwhelmed, running around trying to manage this huge group, but he insisted I or one of the kids should go track her down and demand the card back. We hesitated because she was visibly stressed, and none of us wanted to make a scene over what was really just a minor inconvenience. After about 5 minutes, which wasn't that long given the situation, she returned with the card, apologized, and we left. The issue, however, didn't end there. On the way home, my husband ranted and raved about how terrible the service was and how it ruined his night. He was particularly angry at me for not sticking up for him by chasing down the waitress to expedite things. He claimed I was being inconsiderate of his time and wasn't supportive enough. The thing is, I feel like his reaction was completely disproportionate. Sure, the service wasn't lightning fast, but it was clear the poor waitress was overwhelmed, and I didn't think it was worth making a scene over a few extra minutes. My husband, however, is convinced I was in the wrong and thinks I owe him an apology for not backing him up. So, am I the asshole for not chasing down the waitress or standing up for him in this situation? Or was his reaction over the top? My sister banned me from going on the family trip I paid for, so I canceled her ticket and we went on vacation without her. I'm 29 years old and come from a relatively close-knit family. There are 3 of us siblings. Me, my younger brother, 26, and my younger sister Bonnie, 24. I have a good relationship with my brother, but my relationship with Bonnie has always been a bit complicated. It's not that we don't get along, but she has always been a bit demanding. As the youngest, our parents often favored her when we were kids. While I've tried to let it go, her behavior has tested my patience on many occasions. Not just mine, but my brother's as well. However, his patience is thinner than mine, and when they're together, there's usually some conflict. Earlier this year, I received a good bonus at work, and with my parents' anniversary approaching, I thought it would be a great idea to take the family on vacation. We hadn't gone anywhere together in years, and it seemed like a fantastic way to reconnect and celebrate. I planned a week-long trip to Hawaii, covering all the expenses, flights, lodging, and activities. Hawaii was where my parents had their honeymoon, so I thought it would be a perfect way for them to relive those youthful days. When I announced the trip, my parents were thrilled, as expected. I knew my brother would appreciate the gesture too, but I was a bit unsure about Bonnie's reaction. Her mood is unpredictable. To my surprise, both of them were excited, especially Bonnie, who immediately started talking about all the things she wanted to do and the Instagram videos she planned to make. I was glad everyone seemed happy, but that moment of bliss didn't last long. Bonnie insisted on planning the vacation herself. I told her that since I was paying, I wanted to organize everything. She threw a fit, claiming I wasn't good at planning and that I should let her take over. This wasn't a suggestion but a demand. There were reasons I wanted to handle it myself. First, it was my gift to the family. Second, Bonnie has a tendency to be extravagant when someone else is paying. For instance, she'd book the priciest options without a second thought. I had carefully planned everything within my budget. My parents tried to mediate, suggesting that Bonnie could help if I was too busy. To keep the trip a surprise, I told them the activities would be revealed as we went along. Bonnie didn't like this and kept pressing me for details, saying she needed to shop for the right outfits. Eventually, I gave her the itinerary, hoping it would shut her up. But instead, she called me, furious about certain things she thought needed to be changed for everyone's comfort. Her suggestions were reasonable, so I made a few adjustments. This boosted her ego, and she smugly said, "See? That's why I should have planned this from the start." Reluctantly, I gave her limited access to my bookings, with strict instructions not to make major changes. She promised to stick to the guidelines but immediately announced in the family group chat that she was now in charge of the trip. At first, the changes she made were harmless, like suggesting matching outfits for the family. But a week before the trip, I discovered she had canceled some of the activities I'd booked and replaced them with ones she preferred. She even declared herself the leader of the trip and said everyone should follow her plan. Furious, I called her, trying to reason with her, but she stood her ground. She said I should let her handle it since she was better at planning. I firmly told her no, and that she had already done enough damage. She accused me of being controlling and hung up. That night, my parents called me. Bonnie had already told them her side of the story, and they wanted to know what was going on. I explained the situation without revealing too much to preserve the surprise. To my shock, they sided with Bonnie, saying it didn't matter who planned the trip as long as we spent time together as a family. Frustrated and unappreciated, I considered canceling the entire trip but decided against it. Instead, I stepped back from the planning and let Bonnie take charge. I figured I'd just go along and enjoy the trip, even if it wasn't the way I'd envisioned it. However, things took a turn for the worse. 2 days ago, we were all set to leave the next day, and I received a notification that my tickets had been successfully canceled. I was in complete shock. I immediately called the airline and found out that they had been canceled from my account. They said they couldn't do anything about it. It was no surprise, it was Bonnie. I called her angrily, and she answered as if nothing had happened. I screamed, "How dare you cancel my tickets?" She laughed and replied, "Oh yes, I did." I lost my composure and shouted, "Would you care to explain this?" She casually responded, "Okay, I hate to say this, but we can't have you on the trip. You're too controlling, and your negative attitude will ruin it for everyone. I discussed it with everyone, and the family agreed to leave you out. You're not worth ruining our vacation over." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The trip I had planned and paid for was now happening without me. Somehow, Bonnie had convinced everyone that I was the problem, and they had all agreed to go ahead with it. At that moment, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. I logged into my account, canceled her ticket, and rebooked it under my name. Then I changed the password so she wouldn't be able to access it again or make any changes to the itinerary. I sent a message to the family group chat. Since Bonnie decided I'm not welcome on the trip I paid for, I've canceled her ticket. If any of you want to stay with her, I'll be happy to cancel your tickets as well. The reaction was immediate. My brother called me right away and said he had no idea about Bonnie's moves. I explained the argument I had with her, and he confirmed that she was making things up. He assured me that he never agreed to leave me behind and was pretty sure that our parents would never forbid me from going on the trip I was paying for. It was a relief to know at least he wasn't on Bonnie's side. While I was talking to him, my parents called, furious that I had canceled Bonnie's ticket. They accused me of being petty and vengeful, but I stood my ground. I explained that I had planned and paid for the trip as a gift for the family, and if they didn't want me there, I'd go on a solo trip. But I wasn't going to give this up and sacrifice myself. They confirmed. They hadn't asked Bonnie to cancel my tickets, but they weren't happy that I canceled hers. They insisted that we should all go together on the trip. I told them I wasn't going to let Bonnie dictate the terms of my generosity. Bonnie, of course, was furious. She sent me a flurry of angry messages, calling me all sorts of names. I forwarded the messages to my parents to show them what their daughter was doing. My dad called me and offered to mediate the situation. He said he would include Bonnie in a call where she could apologize and I would then rebook her ticket so we could have a family vacation together. I wanted to resist this request, but a part of me knew that Bonnie would never apologize. So I accepted my dad's proposal. He added Bonnie to the call, but she was too angry to realize it was a conference call. Dad told her that she acted wrongly by canceling my tickets and that she should apologize before hearing anything else. She bluntly responded that she wasn't going to apologize because she did the right thing. We could both hear her muttering, "Apologize to that idiot? Not a chance." Dad hung up the call. He had nothing more to say. After that, I called him back and said, "Now do you see how cruel your daughter is? Or do you still want me to take her with us?" He stayed silent for a moment and said he was torn between two children. He acknowledged that I had done the right thing but admitted he felt sad that the trip wouldn't be the same after this conflict. This wasn't what he had imagined. It was supposed to be a family trip, and no matter how I felt about Bonnie, she was still part of the family. My brother and I might not be affected, but our parents would definitely feel her absence. Update 1. The situation between Bonnie and me got worse after I was excluded from the trip. She turned against me, trying to convince my brother to take her side. She even proposed the idea of sponsoring the trip together so they could leave me out. He laughed at her suggestion and asked if she had enough money to cover 50% of the trip's costs. She admitted that she didn't have the money right now, but promised to pay him back as soon as possible. My brother shook his head in disbelief. Both of us knew she would never follow through. She didn't have a stable job and often skipped work when she wasn't in the mood. When she suggested going to Mexico instead of Hawaii, my brother burst into laughter and rejected her offer to be the free photographer for their vacation. She hung up the phone and resorted to emotionally manipulating our parents to keep her on the trip. Fortunately, my parents stood firm this time, insisting that she apologize if she wanted to join us. They tried to convince her to be the bigger person and forgive Bonnie, urging her to do so, but they had no other choice but to accept that Bonnie wouldn't be joining us. When we boarded the plane, there was tension in the air, and I could see the disappointment in my parents' eyes. Upon arriving in Hawaii, I took charge of the planning and made sure we had a great time. We enjoyed a private luau, snorkeling adventures, and even a helicopter tour of the island. Despite the initial discomfort, we gradually started to relax and enjoy ourselves. My parents began to accept that this was still a family vacation, even without Bonnie. Throughout the week, I received sporadic angry messages from her, full of accusations. Even my parents started to see that her behavior was unreasonable. We came back from the trip with a ton of fresh memories and incredible experiences. Hawaii had a way of easing the tension. Although my parents were still disappointed that Bonnie wasn't there, they appreciated the effort I had put into making the trip memorable. Bonnie blocked me on social media and was furious with our parents for choosing me over her. She even expressed a desire to cut ties with them, but she couldn't because she was living in their house. She called my brother a freeloader for supporting me and said she never wanted to see me again. It was painful, but I knew I had done what I needed to do. I don't regret standing up for myself and setting boundaries, but I do wish things had turned out differently. Maybe someday Bonnie will realize she was on the wrong side, and we can repair our relationship. Until then, I'll hold on to the memories of that amazing trip. Update 2. Here's another update on the saga with my sister. It's been a while since these incidents, but I finally found the time to update here. After returning from the trip, I went back to work and had to put in extra hours to make up for my absence. I didn't talk to my parents about Bonnie right away, but I knew she must have been throwing tantrums against them for enjoying the trip without her, trying to make them feel worse. My brother and I flooded social media with family photos, and it was pretty fun. Almost 3 months later, I visited my parents and noticed that Bonnie's room was empty. I asked about her and I found out that they had finally asked her to leave. Well, not exactly kicked her out, but they told her to leave. She wasn't taking her life or career seriously, frequently missing work without reason. Since she didn't have any responsibilities like rent or food, she didn't take things seriously. A year ago, my parents demanded she start paying rent to live in their house. At first, she was furious and called them evil and greedy. When Dad threatened to evict her, she agreed to pay rent, but in a year she only managed to pay for 3 months. Every month, she came up with a new excuse to avoid paying. As expected, after my parents came back from their trip, she exploded. They tried to calm her down and even brought her gifts, but she threw them in their faces. Finally, Dad had enough of her superior attitude and told her to pack her bags, and he would drive her to her new place. Her behavior immediately changed. She started sobbing, hugged Mom, and said she had acted that way because she missed them and was hurt because we left her alone. Mom responded that she had brought this upon herself and that they didn't intend to leave her out. Her narcissistic behavior forced them to make this decision. She acted as if she were crying, promising to pay the rent every month. However, my parents had already given her enough time to change, but she remained the same narcissistic person. This time, they didn't give in to her manipulations and kicked her out of the house. Dad found a small apartment for her and even paid 2 months' rent. I didn't like how everything was handed to her on a silver platter, but it was better than letting her live in their house for free. Even though they were still concerned for her well-being, kicking her out was the best way to make her more independent. What they didn't know was that she was tough to deal with. Mom called me last week and gave me the latest update about Bonnie. Dad covered 2 months of rent for her while she moved out. Mom gave her prepared meals and snacks that lasted about a week. After that, Bonnie started stopping by my parents' house, staying until dinner time. Mom had to offer her food, and she even started occasionally staying overnight. At first, they tolerated it, thinking she was homesick, but after some time of this behavior, they decided to confront her. Bonnie admitted she had stopped paying rent and was hiding from the landlord. She hadn't paid anything during the 2 months she lived in the apartment. It was all with Dad's money. When Mom asked her what she had done with her salary, she said she bought work shoes. Mom offered to lend her money to cover the rent, but she refused, insisting on returning home. Mom asked Dad for help, and he stood firm, saying there would be no more assistance. He was tired of her manipulative tactics, and if she asked for help again, they wouldn't open the door for her. I thought Dad's response was a bit harsh, but I understood his frustration. He had done enough for Bonnie. She turned to my brother for help, saying she couldn't ask me because it would feed my ego and make her feel like a failure. My brother refused to get financially involved, even asking me indirectly through him to lend her money. He refused to keep it a secret from me, which made Bonnie furious. She became bitter towards him, calling him the one who kicks me out and my pet who runs after me for free food. I took these stories with caution, but her arrogant behavior had reached its peak. Someone had to face her. I'm glad I was the first to stand up to her and leave her out of the trip. I still remember how my parents reacted, trying to twist the situation to include Bonnie. It's a relief that they finally realized how toxic Bonnie was and how she used her role as their daughter to manipulate them. For now, that's all. Thanks for interacting with my post. If there are any more updates about my sister's situation, I will share them in this thread. Update 3. I'm giving you an update 4 weeks after the last one to tell you I saw Bonnie. It's not that I wanted to, but that's how things are with my sister. I saw her when I got home on a Thursday, exhausted from work. There she was, standing at the door, waiting for me. It was a rainy, cold day, and I don't know how long she had been standing there, but she looked miserable. As soon as I saw her, I didn't know what to say, so I gave her a hesitant hello. She was a little more energetic, so I knew this wasn't going to be good. She tried to hug me and asked, "How have you been, little brother?" I just stood there holding my things in my hands while she hugged me. When I finally managed to pull away from her, I opened the door since I didn't want to keep getting wet, but I didn't think to tell her she wasn't welcome. She practically pushed past me and entered without even waiting for me to go in first. After I took off my coat and work things, I asked her what she wanted. She said it had been a while since we'd seen or talked, so she just wanted to stop by to say hi. I told her to cut the act and tell me why she was really there. That's when she put on that sad face she always used with our parents and said she had nowhere to live. Her landlord had finally evicted her after she'd fallen behind on rent for a few weeks. I knew that was a lie because my mom had told me she hadn't paid rent in months, and the landlord had only received money from my dad. I told her no. Then she switched tactics, pressuring me to talk to our parents or our brother to help her since, according to her, I wasn't being a good brother. She said the least I could do was find it in my heart to help her so she wouldn't end up on the streets. I told her I wasn't going to do any of that. If she wanted to win back our parents' favor, she should work on improving her life. Maybe once they saw she was being responsible, they'd consider forgiving her. She didn't like my answer. She probably expected something else from me. She started calling me all kinds of nasty things, saying I was a bad brother. She claimed that just because I had money and a good job, I thought I was superior to everyone else. She also said the rest of the family only cared about me because I paid for things like the trip we went on. It's funny because that's the only thing I've ever paid for them in my entire life. Anyway, I told her I'd heard enough. If she'd already warmed up after being in my home for a bit, it was time for her to head back out into the cold night. I knew she had more to say, probably another insult, but I told her it would be best if she left on her own, or I'd be forced to make her leave. You can imagine she didn't take my ultimatum well. When she finally left, I blocked her on everything. Honestly, I hadn't needed to before because she never reached out to me after the trip. But now I didn't want to take any chances. As for where she's staying or what she's doing now, I have no idea. She hasn't even spoken to our parents. Hopefully, this is the last update I have to give, or maybe the next one will be about her getting her life together. Update 4. Since many people asked me for an update on where my sister has been staying, here's what I know after 10 days. That same night she came to visit me, she went to our brother's house and tried the same thing. But he didn't let her in either, so she ended up leaving. From what I've heard, since my mom has been in touch with her during this time, she's now staying at a friend or coworker's place. I'm not sure how their arrangement works, but I feel sorry for her friend. I mean, having a freeloader live with you can't be easy. That said, I only updated because people asked, not because I really care. So I think this will be my final update. Am I the asshole for skipping my in-laws' Christmas sleepover to stay home alone? For the past decade, I've attended almost every major family gathering hosted by my in-laws: Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthdays, random dinners, you name it. I've always shown up with a smile, eager to contribute and meet the expectations of being a good family member. But this year, I decided I needed to do something different. I opted out of their traditional Christmas Eve sleepover, choosing instead to stay home, alone. This wasn't a decision I made lightly. Over the past few years, I've been through an emotional ringer. I lost both of my parents a few years apart. My dad passed away just before Thanksgiving last year. The grief has been heavy, and the holidays now feel like landmines of memories and emotions. For a while, I couldn't even process my feelings. I just went through the motions. But with the help of therapy and some time off work, I finally started making meaningful progress. This year, I felt the best way to honor my own needs and mental health was to spend the holiday in solitude, reflecting, recharging, and creating a quiet, peaceful space for myself. It wasn't about avoiding my in-laws or rejecting them. It was about taking care of my emotional well-being. When I told my mother-in-law, Amael, I tried to approach it as gently and honestly as possible. I explained that this decision wasn't a reflection of them or anything they'd done, but about what I needed for my mental health. Her response surprised me. She asked, "Why can't you just suck it up for one day?" and questioned whether my therapist had planted this idea in my head. She wanted to know if I had other plans, if they'd upset me, or if I didn't see them as family anymore. While she ultimately said she'd accept it, it was clear she was upset and disappointed. This was particularly confusing because MIL has always been one of my loudest supporters in prioritizing self-care. When I've spoken about struggles with anxiety or grief, she's always told me to do whatever I need to heal. Her sudden guilt-tripping felt contradictory and hurtful. Then there was my sister-in-law, Sil. When I told her, she said, "Don't you have all the time in the world right now?" and called it sad that I wanted to be alone for the holidays. She said the holidays are for family and made me feel like I was failing some unspoken moral obligation by not participating. The pushback caught me off guard. My in-laws have always been accommodating when my spouse has had to skip events due to anxiety, so their lack of understanding toward me feels targeted. It's frustrating because I'm not asking anyone to change their plans or accommodate me. I'm just stepping away for a year. I feel proud of myself for setting boundaries and prioritizing my mental health, but the guilt is creeping in. I know I've disappointed them, and I'm worried this will damage my relationships with them long term. I can't help but feel invalidated by their reactions, especially since they've always been so understanding with my spouse. At the same time, even if I caved and went to the sleepover, I know I'd be resentful, overwhelmed, and emotionally drained. I feel like I made the right choice for myself, but I also can't shake the doubt. Should I have just sucked it up and gone to keep the peace? So, am I the asshole for skipping the Christmas sleepover to spend the holiday alone, even if it upset my in-laws? Am I the asshole for not buying my friend's book? I, 25M, have been friends with Tom, 22M, for about 4 years. Tom is an independent writer and director, not famous, but incredibly passionate about his craft. Over the years, he's worked on a lot of projects, often commissioning freelance talent to bring his visions to life. I've contributed a significant amount to his projects, all for free. I'm a small-time musician, and while it's just a side passion for me, I have a day job. I know how much it means to have someone support your creative work, so I wanted to be kind and give him that help. Over the years, I've let Tom use dozens of my original songs and instrumentals, compositions I wrote, recorded, and produced entirely on my own. I even wrote and recorded intro music for his website and provided voice acting for a few of his projects. All of this was done without asking for or expecting anything in return. I was happy to help as a friend. To be clear, I wasn't looking for compensation. As long as the work could be done remotely, recordings and files shared digitally, it didn't feel like a massive deal to me, but I did have my limits. For instance, I would have drawn the line if he asked me to travel to his place so he could direct my performances in person. Fast forward to a few days ago, and Tom asked if I'd buy a copy of his new book. I declined, explaining that I couldn't right now because I didn't have the extra money for leisure purchases. But I also felt like it was crossing a line to ask me for money after all the free labor and creative contributions I've already given him. Tom didn't take it well. He accused me of switching up and not supporting friends. He also said he didn't think there was any limit to how much I'd be willing to do for his projects, which really stung. I told him that most people, friend or not, would expect compensation for original work. I've gone above and beyond to support him for free, and for him to then ask for more money this time felt disrespectful. He didn't see it that way and believes I'm in the wrong. While we've talked and texted like normal since, he's still salty about it. He keeps trying to reignite the argument, saying I'm not a real friend for refusing to buy his book. Each time, I tell him that his attitude is making me even less interested in reading it, let alone buying it. I feel conflicted. On one hand, I wanted to stand up for myself because it felt like I was being taken advantage of. I've already done so much for Tom, and I don't think it's fair for him to expect unlimited support without acknowledging the contributions I've already made. On the other hand, I do feel bad for upsetting him. I genuinely want him to succeed, and I believe in the work he's doing. I didn't mean to hurt his feelings or make him think I don't care about his success. So, am I the asshole for not buying my friend's book? Am I the asshole for asking my fiancé to clean my van? My fiancé, 33M, and I, 31F, live together with our 2 children. Right now, I'm a stay-at-home mom since I just had our second child, and my fiancé works full-time. Before I got pregnant, I bought a new van. It's in my name. I'm the only one on the title, insurance, and registration. My fiancé had his own car, which he was buying from his mom, but we couldn't afford the payments, so he returned it. Since I'm not working, he uses my van as his primary vehicle for commuting to work and running about half of our errands. The issue is he's completely trashed the inside of the van. He works for a company that does cleanup for the city, and he's always finding things he thinks are worth something and bringing them home. Most of it never makes it out of the van. Here's what's currently inside: 2 stacks of plastic and metal chairs, a rusty propane tank, a rusty chimney stack for lighting charcoal, even though we already have one, pieces of 2x4 wood, empty food wrappers and drink containers, tons of Pokemon card pack trash. He opens the packs in the van and throws the plastic and tins on the floor, receipts scattered everywhere. At one point, he brought home 3 square bales of hay for his goats and didn't put anything underneath them. My floorboards were covered in hay for weeks, and ants that had been living in the hay invaded the van. The mess has gotten so bad that I no longer feel safe putting our kids in the van, and now it started to obstruct the view out of the back window. I've repeatedly told him not to throw trash on the floor and to stop treating the van like a dumpster. Every time, his response is the same: "Oh, stop worrying. I'll clean it up later." While he does occasionally pick up the trash, it always ends up filthy again within days. Today, I'd had enough. When he got home from work, I left him with the kids and went out to get a drink from the store. As I was backing up, I noticed how much the junk was piling up. It was getting dangerous. I came back inside and told him he had 10 minutes to grab anything he wanted to. Keep out of the van because I was about to throw everything else away. He seemed completely unfazed. He said he didn't know why it bothered me so much. "You don't even drive it as much as I do anyway." That comment set me off. I told him it didn't matter. It's still my van and I deserve to have it treated with respect. I also told him I'm embarrassed every time I'm in it because trash literally spills out of the doors when they're opened. His response: he told me I was being an asshole for no reason. Now I'm wondering if I went too far by issuing an ultimatum. On one hand, I feel justified. It's my van, and he's made it unsafe and unsanitary for our family. On the other hand, I wonder if I could have handled it differently. So, was I the asshole? Am I the asshole for asking my grandma not to interrupt my test? Background: I'm a high school student attending an online school, and I live with my grandma. Overall, our relationship is really great, and we've always been close. Together, we also take care of 3 big dogs, so our house is usually lively and full of activity. The school I attend has strict policies, especially when it comes to testing. For a proctored test, where you're monitored via webcam and microphone, the rules are rigid. No one else in the room, no talking, no noise, no distractions like barking dogs, and all electronic devices except the computer need to be out of reach. It's a serious setup that feels almost like a courtroom, and if any rule is broken, you risk your test being invalidated. To prepare for my test, I made sure to communicate everything to my grandma in advance. I let her know I had a test scheduled and explained the strict requirements. What happened? The test day started fine. I locked my barking dog outside to avoid noise interruptions, though I felt bad about it because she doesn't like being left out. I also shut my door and got everything ready for the exam. About 15 minutes into the test, my grandma started talking loudly on the phone in the living room. Although her voice was muffled since she was far from my room, it was distracting. I tried to focus, thinking it wasn't a big deal as long as the proctor couldn't hear it. But then things escalated. She decided it was the perfect time to replace the batteries in a remote control for our heated toilet seat. This wasn't an urgent matter. It wasn't like the TV remote stopped working while she was in the middle of her favorite show. It was just a minor household task that could have waited. Unfortunately, the batteries are stored in a closet right next to my bedroom. While still on the phone with her friend, She stood just outside my door, rummaging through the closet. She was talking loudly for a good 5 minutes while looking for the batteries. At that moment, I was torn between frustration and panic. The proctor could hear everything happening around me, and I was worried they might think I was talking to someone or being coached. Adding to my frustration, she knew the remote needed new batteries hours earlier but chose to deal with it during my test. Why she thought this was a good time is beyond me. What I did, I felt my focus slipping, so I decided to take a break. I explained the situation to the proctor, stepped out of my room, and addressed my grandma. I said, "Can you please not talk on the phone right outside my room?" My tone was firm, and while I didn't yell, I know I sounded upset. After my request, she stopped. But now she's acting cold and upset with me, as if I overreacted. My dilemma. Did I handle this situation poorly? I feel bad for upsetting her, but at the same time, I had tried to prevent this by warning her in advance. Was it unreasonable to ask for quiet during a critical moment like a proctored test? Reflection. From my perspective, I wasn't trying to attack her or be rude. It's just that proctored tests come with so much pressure, and even a small mistake could mean losing my chance to complete it. I also feel like I set clear expectations beforehand, and it was frustrating to have them ignored. On the other hand, I understand that this is her house, and maybe my tone rubbed her the wrong way. I just wish she could see how important that moment was for me. So, am I the asshole for asking my grandma not to interrupt my test? Am I the asshole for bringing in my neighbor's cat even after they told me not to let him in? For context, I've always been an animal lover, especially when it comes to cats. A few months ago, I noticed a scruffy, skinny, dirty cat wandering around my neighborhood. He looked malnourished, his fur was matted, and he didn't have a collar, so I assumed he was a stray. I started leaving food out for him, and eventually he began to trust me enough to come closer. One day, I decided to let him inside, gave him a bath, which he surprisingly tolerated, and let him stay the night. From that point on, he became a regular visitor. Over the next 5 weeks, he would sleep in my house every night, curl up in my bed, and even got along well with my other cats. During the day, he'd come and go as he pleased. If he walked to the door and seemed eager to leave, I'd let him out. I was under the impression that he might have been a stray for years, especially since I'd seen him wandering the area for as long as I've lived here, about 4 years. However, something about his friendly behavior made me curious, so I decided to put a collar with my number on him, just in case he belonged to someone. That's when things got complicated. An hour after I placed the collar on him, I received a call. The man on the other end told me that the cat was theirs, that he was well cared for, and that they actually had 7 other cats. I was polite and asked if they wanted me to stop feeding him or letting him inside. At first, the man seemed indifferent, but then his wife got on the line and told me firmly to stop letting him into my house. I agreed, not wanting to cause any tension. After all, it's their cat, right? But here's where it gets tricky. For the past 3 nights, this cat has been sitting outside my gate or on my car, waiting to be let in. I've seen him there at all hours of the night, 3 p.m., 10 p.m., even 2 a.m., just sitting there, looking at my door. The weather has been getting colder, dropping to freezing temperatures at night, and it breaks my heart to leave him out there. Tonight, for example, it's 34 degrees. I opened my door, and from a block away, I saw him sprinting toward me. He came inside, rubbed up against my leg, and immediately went to his usual spot on my bed, purring contentedly. This situation is tearing me apart because, in my heart, I feel like his owners don't care for him as much as they claim. If one of my cats didn't come home after a single night, I'd be out searching, knocking on doors, and doing everything in my power to find them. But this cat had been sleeping in my home for over 5 weeks before they even noticed or reached out. That makes me question their attachment to him. Plus, I've seen this cat wandering outside for years, which doesn't seem to line up with their claims of being attentive owners. I understand that he might be one of their many cats, and maybe they think he's fine being outdoors, but from what I've seen, he craves attention and care. He doesn't just show up for food. He wants warmth, comfort, and companionship. When he comes inside, he doesn't just eat and leave, he stays, he cuddles, and he acts like he belongs here. So, am I wrong for letting him back into my house, even after his owners told me not to? Should I ignore him when he's sitting outside, shivering in the cold, waiting for me to open the door? Or am I overstepping by essentially adopting a cat that technically isn't mine? It's a tough moral dilemma, and I'd love some insight. Am I the asshole for overreacting when my friend logged into something on my phone without my permission? To start, I'm 17 and a junior in high school. My friend, let's call them T, is 16 and a sophomore. Final season is here, and during our first period, a more relaxed extracurricular class, we had a free period. People brought snacks and devices to hang out. One of my other friends, S, brought her Nintendo Switch and we decided to play Jackbox on it. Since T doesn't currently have a phone, I let them use mine to join the game while I used another device. We played a few rounds of a game called Murder Party, and at some point my phone locked. I gave T my passcode without a second thought so they could keep playing. After the game, I didn't bother to take my phone back, figuring I'd grab it at the end of the period. I was busy with my own device and not paying close attention to what T was doing. That's when the problem started. While I wasn't looking, T decided to log into their account on my phone, specifically on a website called Character AI, C.ai, platform where you can chat with AI versions of characters from shows and games. When I discovered this, I wasn't okay with it. My parents have access to my browsing history, and I was concerned about what T might have searched on the site. C.ai can get pretty suggestive, and I've used it before, so I know how it works. I didn't want to deal with the potential fallout if my parents stumbled upon something inappropriate that they searched. I admit I snapped at T when I found out. I told them they shouldn't have gone on my phone without telling me and explained that my parents can see my history. I tried to take my phone back, but they kept stalling, saying, "Give me a minute." Eventually, they gave it back and apologized repeatedly. I told them it was okay and tried to downplay my frustration, but in truth, I was still upset. I wasn't just mad about what they did. It was the fact that they didn't tell me beforehand and assumed it was fine. Later, I talked to S and some other friends about the situation. They all agreed that T was wrong to use my phone without permission, especially for something unrelated to what I'd let them use it for. But I still feel guilty for snapping. I know high schoolers, myself included, can be irresponsible and make impulsive decisions, so maybe I overreacted? On one hand, I think it's fair to be upset about someone breaching boundaries like that. Logging into an account on someone else's phone without asking is definitely crossing a line. On the other hand, T's apologies seem genuine, and I wonder if my harsh tone was unnecessary, especially since they're younger and probably weren't thinking about the consequences. So, am I the asshole for snapping at T, or were my feelings justified given the situation? Am I the asshole for being ungrateful about what my parents bought me? Hi everyone. I'm feeling really conflicted and could use some outside opinions on this situation. Am I being an ungrateful jerk? Or do I have a point? For context, I'm in my late 20s and currently living with my parents while saving up to buy a house. I'm incredibly thankful for their support and generosity. They've been more than accommodating, giving me a place to stay and letting me save every penny toward my future home. I'm aware that not everyone is so fortunate, and I never want to take that for granted. That said, 2 days ago, my mom messaged me out of the blue to tell me they'd bought me a new bed. No prior discussion, no hints dropped. They just decided to go out and spend £500 on a mattress, bed frame, and headboard. When I asked why, she explained that my dad had recently slept in a bed the same size as mine, a standard double, and didn't like it. Apparently, he decided that if he found it uncomfortable, it must mean my bed was unsuitable too, and they didn't want me sleeping on something like that. I tried to respond graciously. I told her that I really appreciated the gesture and that it was incredibly thoughtful of them to consider me. But I also said that I love my current bed. I sleep great in it. I struggle to get out of it most mornings, which is always a good sign for me, and I've never felt like it needed replacing. I added that I felt guilty about them spending so much money on something I didn't need or ask for. I even suggested that they save the idea for something else, maybe put it towards something I'd actually need when I eventually move out. Her response? A curt, You're getting it. Just say thank you. I decided to drop it. The next morning, I woke up to instructions to dismantle my old bed because the new one was arriving that day. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I acted excited about it, pretending my hesitation the day before was just me being overly practical. When the new bed arrived, I'll admit it looked great. But all I could think was, I just want my old bed back. That night, I slept in it. For the first time. Or rather, I tried to sleep. I woke up 3 times during the night and was wide awake by 6 a.m. In my old bed, I would have slept through until 8 a.m. with no issues. When my parents asked how it was, I told them the truth. I didn't sleep well. They seemed visibly disappointed but brushed it off.